The next matter to be considered. Yes, Chair of PPC.
Thank you, sir. Due to the length of the order paper, and as advised on the previous two occasions on the two previous meetings, I would like to propose, sir, that tomorrow evening we sit until 8 o'clock with a half-hour lunch break between 5:30 and 6 p.m. And hopefully with a dinner break, I beg your pardon. And there will be some sandwiches provided, I understand, sir, during that half an hour interval.
Thank you. Members content to proceed as suggested by the Chair? Thank you very much. The next matter to consider is the first amendment lodged by Deputy Kovach. I'll ask the Greffier to read the first amendment.
Paragraph B8. After the words Appendix 2, Summary Tables 5, 1 and 2 of the report, insert the words, except that in Summary Table 5.2, under the heading Feasibility, there should be inserted a new head of expenditure entitled Development Levies Feasibility Study with an allocation of £100,000 to the 2026 estimate.
Deputy Kovach.
Sir, I want to start with a simple fact. In April 2023, this Assembly agreed decisively on P14 2023, 40 votes for, 1 against, 2 abstentions. Deputy Lu supported it then and before when he brought something similar. The principle was clear. Jersey needs a fair mechanism to capture land value uplift when land is rezoned on planning permission or planning permission is granted. Originally, this was meant to be delivered in March 2024. In 2024, actually. The Council of Ministers extended to March 2025, which I accepted in that proposal. But the deadline has now passed. The extra time was meant for the complex technical work needed to design a fair, workable mechanism. Yet, sir, that work has not even started, let alone been completed. Throughout last year, in multiple oral questions and questions without notice to the Environment Minister and the Chief Minister, myself, Deputy Renouf and Deputy Jean repeatedly asked them about progress on it. Each response was the same. No resources, no money, no capacity. I have it all printed and I can quote from every single response in case the Minister doesn't remember, and I also have handed the Hansard of the original P14 debate if needed. But in the interest of time, I won't quote that now. The Minister's bid for funding in the 2024 budget failed. Obviously, the March 2025 deadline was missed. The project was ignored in the budget this year as well. At this rate, sir, the levy-type mechanism may arrive after the next ice age, which is why this amendment is the warm coat we need now. This amendment is simple, practical and supportive in response to that. It provides 100,000 from the Consolidated Fund to finally complete the feasibility study, technical analysis, and consultation already mandated by the Assembly. I honestly thought this would be seen a breath of fresh air, giving the Minister the tools he has repeatedly said he lacks. Yet now, in response to this amendment, the Minister says he will progress at pace, slowly in phases, using existing resources, but partially. How is that possible? Yesterday, on Monday, he said exactly the same thing as last year. Massive cuts, no resources, unfilled vacancies. His department is stretched. Without additional funding, it's obvious from all the ministers said that his work cannot happen. Some argue the process is complex or that consultation is needed. I agree. It is complex, and that is why he allowed extra time. But consultation is not a question of if, it is a question of how to design a fair mechanism. Nobody will answer, yes, I want to be charged, if you ask landowners or developers that directly. Objective expert technical work is essential. It needs to start now, or we will continue seeing windfalls like Field J 1109, 70,000 becoming 3.55 million overnight from rezoning. Unearned gains created at the stroke of a pen overnight. This study will identify the point at which charging is fairer, so everyone wins. Arguments that it might deter developers or increase costs are not standing, and that's exactly why this feasibility work is necessary. It will explore the fairest mechanism, whether at the point of sale, point of development, or otherwise found suitable to work, and ensure it is viable, fair, and aligned with market conditions. But it cannot happen if we delay further. I am disappointed that neither the Minister nor the Chief Minister contacted me before submitting their comments. I highlighted to the Chief Minister at the budget briefing that Minister's 2024 bid failed, and that I was surprised it was not included in the 2025 budget either. The Chief Minister said it was missed being discussed to include it, but if I bring an amendment, it will be considered. Now, only just a bit before the adjournment, the Chief Minister and the Minister finally engaged with me to discuss this amendment. And while it's better at the last minute than never, the negotiation unfortunately failed. The Minister is still only willing to begin work on a levy limited to affordable housing sites. But that contradicts what the Assembly already agreed in 2023. A fair mechanism for any significant land value uplift from rezoning or planning permission. Starting only with affordable housing would actually disadvantage the very part of the sector already carrying inflated costs, and it would shield the far larger uplifts elsewhere. That is neither fair nor rational, and is unnecessary because with proper communication and well-designed feasibility study, developers and landowners can be reassured. The Minister would have full flexibility to design the mechanism so it does not deter development, whether the trigger point is at sale, at development, or another fair stage. But that analysis must cover the whole system, not a narrow slice of it. Now, this amendment provides the resources and amount already identified as necessary by the environment officers, not by me. Rejecting this amendment on the grounds that it can be done slower in phases from the department's existing resources makes no sense. All evidence, past responses from officers and the Minister, and Monday's answer from the Minister, confirms that these resources for this work do not exist. Yes, we just approved scrutiny's amendment, which gives back some funds to the department, but Minister's response of no funds or resources to progress this project was even when now these returned funds were on last year. So it doesn't seem to make a difference for this work. And we have also heard of so many more things needed to be done in the department with the same funds. How much longer will this work be delayed? How long will the Assembly's decisions be ignored? What is the point of passing propositions if ministers pick and choose what they want to implement? I want this debate to stick to the subject of this amendment, the funding for the already approved work needed to progress at a normal pace and not be stalled again. I do not want us to re-debate if we like or not doing development levies. This was already debated and approved. If the Minister no longer agrees with the decision, the proper democratic route is rescindment motion. Ignoring it or delaying it until others have to deal with it or indefinitely is not governance. Sir, all I am asking is that we give the Minister the tools he kept telling us he doesn't have. Otherwise, we're just asking him to build a house with a teaspoon. Also, worth noting, the 100,000 is not lost money. As I mentioned in my report, it can be repaid from the first levy proceeds or from underspends anywhere. So if he indeed proves he doesn't need it, he will have it as an underspend and can pay it back, so really no loss. It is a small investment for a mechanism that will deliver fairness, transparency, and sustainable revenue for housing and infrastructure. And as is the Environment Minister's birthday, I bring him this offering of 100,000 gift to help his department go ahead with the full work needed for development levies without further delay. Whether he unwraps this gift or not is of course up to him, but my friends always say I make thoughtful gifts, so happy birthday. I ask members to support this amendment to progress the work already agreed, and I make the proposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the proposition seconded?
Yes.
Thank you. Minister for the Environment.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for her kind offer. She wants to make a cheque out to cash. It will certainly be a birthday to remember. Sir, the proposal before us today seeks funding to develop a comprehensive development levy, a mechanism designed to capture a share of land value uplift or development gain to fund infrastructure and community benefit work. On paper, it sounds like an attractive proposition. It sounds like a good way to make development pay for things our communities need. This Assembly has recognised that principle and endorsed it, as the Deputy says, on more than one occasion now. But let me share my perspective. I know from experience that introducing a development levy in Jersey is not easy. I tried myself in 2017 when I brought forward the Jersey Infrastructure Levy. I still bear the scars of that debate. The work undertaken then was thorough and provided a strong foundation. But if we are to introduce a comprehensive levy today, covering all forms of development, that work will need to be done again. Economic circumstances have changed significantly since 2017. Our development industry currently is fragile, and the viability of a full levy needs detailed re-examination and proper consideration. The Council of Ministers does not believe right now is the time to embark down that route. However, ministers do recognise the strong and consistent support for the principle of a levy, and we share that ambition. We must face reality, however. Progress has been limited, I'll accept that, not because of a lack of will, but because of the complexity of this issue and the absence of technical capacity to design a robust, fair and workable system, and I'll come on to that again in a second. Introducing a levy is not simple. It's a highly technical area of policy and legislation, and if we get it wrong, the consequences could be serious, impacting housing supply, market stability and planning efficiency. That is why the ministers believe the right approach is a phased one. Rather than spending £100,000 immediately on a full technical assessment, we propose starting with what we can do now, using in-house expertise and existing budgets. Yes, I've been short of staff until very recently, and I'm starting to make some progress with that. But the planning policy team sit outside of the Environment Department. However, I can say that for the first time since I have been Minister, we now have a full complement of planning policy officers. We need also to remember, though, that this government has set a ban on the use of consultants, so technical work like this is additionally challenging. The first phase of the work that I would propose to do will focus on where a levy is most likely to be viable, on sites rezoned for affordable housing where land uplift is most evident. This is a critical issue highlighted in Deputy Kovacs' amendment, and we agree it should be addressed, but its viability must be assessed against the public benefit already delivered through the provision of affordable houses. By starting here, we take a practical, targeted step forward in an area that most clearly requires consideration. From this first phase, we can learn and adapt, building the foundations for a comprehensive levy in the future, informed by experience. This is how we ensure a system that works for Jersey, avoids unintended consequences, and safeguards housing supply and planning efficiency. Our commitment is clear. Progress can be made and begin in a focused way, tackling the areas with the greatest potential for success, while still laying the groundwork for a much broader system in the future. For those reasons, ministers urge members to reject this amendment and support a phased approach using existing resources. This is a more appropriate route for the island at this time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to be brief. I think we want to get on and we know where this vote is going to go. But I do share the proposer's frustration. I was the minister who proposed the amendment that extended the timeline of the original proposition brought by Deputy Kovacs. I proposed that amendment delaying the implementation to what I considered a more reasonable time frame. And I still think it was a reasonable time frame. And it is a shame that the current government did not do the work that had been promised. It was an assembly decision, not a proposition of the government of the day. I am, however, not entirely surprised. The minister's speech transmits on a wavelength that says this is in a very difficult box and there is a reluctance to tackle the issue head on. We have that fragility of the industry, full and proper consultation, we share the ambition, but, and so on. I'm afraid to say that my memory of this from when I was in government was that Treasury always held it at arm's length and felt it had a very bad smell indeed. And I suspect nothing much has changed in that view. The Minister made a compelling case that it is not easy to do. Fair enough. It will take a lot of work. Fair enough. It requires a phased investment. Well, maybe even that's fair enough. But if there's one thing that could make it actually happen, get the phased work underway, make sure that something really does happen, it would be to put some money aside to do it now. That is the one thing that means if there is this awfully difficult piece of work to be done, why are we waiting around? I do not buy the arguments about the need to focus on the rezoned fields. That bird has flown. It won't become relevant again until the next island plan comes forward. I think it is more urgent that we deal with the issue in the round. We had a recent application near the airport, the Strive development. There would have been an effective rezoning of a green field into a site that would have become worth millions. Unless we take action, there will be more of those in all likelihood. And I think that we should be taking action now to bring those development levies in. The Minister began to nudge in the direction of relitigating when he started to talk about how difficult it was, the fragility of the industry and so on. I would just repeat some of the points that I think were made originally, which is that the levy is just. The huge uplift in value that comes from the result of a decision to zone a field that was previously not zoned for development or another big rezoning decision is the result of social investment, historic social investment and continuing social investment. It is the result of a government decision, and without that decision, the uplift in price does not exist. It is a decision, it is a value created by the government, not by the landowner. And the value is dependent on historic and continuing investment in roads, electricity, airports, and so on. Rezone a field in Sudan, and you will not get the uplift in value that you get in a field in Jersey. It is because we have invested over centuries and continue to invest in infrastructure, social infrastructure, courts, airports, and so on, that those fields have and those sites have value. So I think we should get on and do the work.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else speak on the amendment? Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to follow Deputy Renniff on this speech because we are of the same opinion. This was an Assembly decision. Let's remember that, and it's not the previous Assembly, it is this current Assembly, that we decided that this was necessary. So since then we have seen a number of fields be rezoned, previously rezoned in the island plan, have actually been then transacted to start development on. A lot of these fields, especially the ones more on the west of the island, have all had caveats on that they need to be connected to the drainage before they can be lived in. And of course, that's something that the taxpayer is now paying for. We're building a very large attenuation tank by the airport so that these new developments can fit on. And of course, the person who owned those fields beforehand has been granted a massive uplift in those fields' value, has been paid handsomely for those fields, and has not paid any tax to help us do the drains for these homes. And as Deputy Renniff said, these fields have now already flown, they've already been done. But that does not mean there's not other sites within this island that are going to face the same uplift in value, but also face conditions on them around drainage. So we do know we have an ageing sewerage system. and the funds for this from this levy would have gone a long way to helping islanders pay for it. It would have also maybe even helped cover off some of the other things that we've been needing money for here, there. But just if we talk about looking for building and development, obviously drainage is a massive problem. We are facing the fact that drainage charges have been mentioned again within budgets to be looked at, investigated or implemented. So I am very disappointed that a States Assembly decision is just being ignored and passed the buck and completely removed from the budget. It is, in my mind, not acceptable. If this was going to be the case, then a rescindment should have been brought and we could have all voted whether or not we still agree that it's the right thing to do. So I am supporting this because we can't have the development levies to be removed from our budget. There's a small allocation of money which will be paid out very quickly if this is brought through. I feel no reason why we should be delaying and the work should begin.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else speak on this amendment? No one wishes to speak. Deputy Gorst.
Thank you, sir. Notwithstanding the decision of this current Assembly, I think the Minister is right to be cautious. It's not re-litigation of the issue as has been indicated. Any policy, and this Assembly has argued over the policy of the 3% additional tax on stamp duty on buy-to-lets, about the timing, and therefore the Minister is right to carefully undertake this work. He doesn't need the additional money, but he must have mind to the economic conditions of the island. And I worry, sir, that we don't have enough of a mind to economic conditions when we are making decisions in the Assembly. So I think that the Minister can undertake the work without the well-intentioned amendment of Deputy Kovac, and as I understand it, that's the undertaking he's given, and I ask members to reject, therefore, the amendment and the need to transfer funds and allow the Minister to carefully, taking into account the economic conditions, undertake the work that he's agreed to do. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Yes, Minister for Treasury and Resources.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir, I would just like to pick up exactly on the same points that Deputy Gorst has just made. Our economic environment has changed quite dramatically since this proposition was originally passed. Deputy War, I think, told us yesterday that in the intervening period, 6 construction firms had collapsed. That's part of the economic framework that we have created for them. At the Question Time event I attended last week, there was a huge amount of concern in the audience about the lack of support in this budget for the economy. While I don't agree that's the case, we're doing a huge amount of work on the competitiveness framework. We have money through the Better Business Support Package. We are doing things for the economy, but this type of initiative has potential to damage it. We need to remember that we need to build our construction industry. We want it to be burgeoning. It is a big part. Construction is a big part of our economy. We need to support it, and we need to make sure they all get back together and start working and start rebuilding property development. So again, I also ask, and the Minister has committed to starting the work within his initial budget. So again, I urge members to reject this amendment.
Thank you, Minister. Does anyone else speak on this amendment? Deputy Kovac.
Thank you to everyone speaking in this debate. Sir, for over 20 years, public decisions have created millions in land value uplift, and it has all gone to private owners, as we've seen with Field mentioned before. Andium Homes now absorbs inflated costs to provide affordable housing. This amendment is about fairness, democracy, and delivery. It provides the funds to do the work the Assembly already mandated in 2023. Sir, I must again highlight that even today's last-minute attempt of negotiation failed for one simple reason. the minister still insists on starting only with affordable housing sites. That would create an imbalanced and unfair system, hitting affordable housing first while leaving the much larger private sector uplifts untouched. That is the opposite of what the Assembly voted for, and it risks increasing costs for those who can least absorb them. A proper feasibility study must analyze the full levy, not a partial version that distorts the market and undermines fairness. With clear communication and the right technical work, the minister has full flexibility to design a mechanism that does not deter development, involving all the relevant parts in the discussion. But he must first commit to analyzing the entire system without delay, exactly as this Assembly mandated. And it would be useful to then have an update from him with where the work is at before the end of his term. This amendment enables the full analysis to be done in a fair way for all parts involved. It doesn't mean that after the introduction of a fair identified levy can't be implemented in phases, but to know what's fair, the full analysis needs to be done at the same time. Yes, there is complex work needed, but we took lots of complex decisions before, and that's not a reason to not start the work, especially as minister's mandate is close to ending. So we have to make sure that work has the funds to continue next term and not stall again. What does my amendment do? Funds the required technical work, fulfills the Assembly's 2023 mandate, enables a comprehensive and fair system, avoids delay and partial implementation, brings new revenue into the budget, supports housing and infrastructure investment, ensures the community shares in land value uplift, not just private landowners. The minister's phased approach does not solve the capacity issue, does not meet the Assembly's 2023 decision, and risks further delay. In 2017, a RAP viability assessment already covered much of the heavy lifting, which will make it easier to start from updating that work. All arguments against this amendment collapse under analysis. Resources, we heard before, don't exist. This amendment fixes that, or if they do exist, just reimburse to where it came from at the end. The process is complex, exactly why the feasibility study is needed. It might deter developers. The analysis work is meant to ensure the mechanism is fairly done and market sensitive. Planning will be more complex. Well-designed levy increases confidence and reduces suspicion around rezoning. Supporting this amendment is not radical and has no reason to be controversial. It funds the technical work to deliver what we have already decided. Again, if ministers oppose it for other reasons than being said in the comments to this budget amendment, the democratic way is to bring a rescindment and test it if the Assembly agrees. Until then, they must act on Assembly decisions, especially when resources are offered. My mantra I keep on repeating is simple. Where there's a will, there's a way. The question is, does the minister and the government have the will to find the way and fund the way? Members, this is a modest investment with enormous public benefit. It allows us to capture fair land value uplift, fund housing and infrastructure, reduce pressure on the public purse, protect future generations, and make Jersey system transparent and fair. Do we not need ways to fairly bring more money to the future budgets? Then let us not delay another year. Let us not allow procedural inertia to override a democratic decision. Let's give the minister the means to deliver on a commitment already made. Sir, if land can gain millions at the stroke of a pen, surely we can spare temporarily 100,000 at the stroke of a common sense to start the work agreed, but not started past its extended deadline and delayed for lack of funds and resources. Not to mention again that this will end up bringing money to the budget once in place. It's also important to stress that this 100,000 is not gone, as I mentioned before. If the minister proves he can deliver without it, then it becomes an underspend and can be paid straight back, either from the levy's early proceeds or from underspend. The state do not lose an extra penny. We've heard repeatedly that the department is on a budget diet. Well, sir, this amendment isn't a three-course meal, it's a vitamin, and this time they took it. This is about fairness, accountability, and following through fully, not partially. I ask members to support this amendment, progress with the needed analysis, and let Jersey finally share in the value it creates. Thank you, sir, and I call for the bell.
proceeding. The appellant has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Balancing amendment has been rejected. 15 votes for, 27 votes contra. Yes.
Those voting for, Deputies Southern, Doublé, Ward, Alves, Gardner, Mezek, Coles, Porre, War, Miles, Renouf, Catherine Curtis, Feltham, Jearn and Kovac. Those voting contra, the Connotabs of St Helier, St Brelard, Trinity, St John, St Clement, Grouville and St Saviour. Deputies Labby, Luce, Morel, Lehegra, Ayer, Gorst, Farnham, Moore, Balash, Scott, Binet, Miller, Howell, Binet, Ferry, Alex Curtis, Ward, Wilson, Stevenson and online Deputy Andrews.
I'll move to the 29th amendment proposed by Deputy Wilson. I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Paragraph B8. After the words Appendix 2, Summary Tables 5.1 and 2 of the report, insert the words, except that in Summary Table 5.2, the 2026 estimate for the line Fort Regent redevelopment should be reduced by 4,500,000 and the 2026 estimate for the line Lesquay should be increased by 4,500,000. Paragraph B7, after the words appendix to the accompanying report, insert the words, except that on page 56 in table 20, it states the lines entitled Lesquay and Fort Regent redevelopment should be substituted with the following as tabulated.
Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. I feel as though this is a deja vu moment. So we were here 12 months ago talking about this very issue, but I'm going to have another stab. For more than a decade, families and young people in Lesquay and the surrounding areas have been promised investment in a proper youth centre. For more than a decade, those promises have been quietly shelved, deferred or buried. The story of Lesquay is not just about a building. It's about what value government places on the welfare of young people in the area and the community that they live in. A promise made by the Chief Minister when we had the same debate 12 months ago is no different to the promises made by him and other politicians over the last 10 years. He promised to get it over the line when myself and members of the Lesquay Community Development Group met with him to explain the issues the community was facing with the limited facilities on offer. But, sir, a carefully worded statement designed to convey a sense of caring, but sprinkled with the same kind of rhetoric we have come to expect, doesn't really have an impact in meeting the needs of young people living in the community. It's simply not good enough. It's not about the fact that resources have been set aside. It's about the timing of when these resources will be available. Kicking this development down the road again for another 2 or 3 years does nothing for young people in the area. A lick of paint and a little bit of redecoration does nothing to further assist youth workers to deliver the kind of support and education to the young people in the area to an acceptable standard that will be attractive to people of all ages. The youth workers attached to this youth club are amazing people, and they are instrumental in keeping young people connected to their community, albeit in the most depressing conditions. and members will have seen already pictures of the environment they're working in. So why is it that this government is finding it so hard to secure the money for Squez this year and kicking it down the road again for another 2 to 3 years, when money can be found to fund other things in short time? There's a stark reality here, sir, and that is that this government has no agenda around the regeneration of communities, except, of course, in St Helier. The consequences of not addressing the needs in areas like St Clement are serious. We are already starting to see signs of a generation of young people growing up in the area with an aspiration to go nowhere. And for this reason alone, the redevelopment of Squez Youth Club is critical, not only to the part of the community infrastructure, but to the well-being of a future generation. In 2013, clear commitments were made to provide facilities for the community. Since then, the need has only grown more acute. Families in Squez know all too well the importance of safe, structured spaces where people can learn, build friendships, and avoid the pitfalls that come when society leaves them to fend for themselves. Yet time and time again, when the moment came to act, government failed to plan, it failed to fund, and it failed to deliver. So this is not merely an administrative oversight, it signals an attitude towards the welfare of young people in the area and a lack of political will. Projects elsewhere in the island have received timely backing, with funds found for pet schemes and headline projects, but for Squez, the community still is left with half promises and token gestures. The past 10 years reveal a pattern, a failure to put young people at the centre of policy, a refusal to recognise that investing in them is investing in Jersey's future. Instead, they have tolerated crumbling facilities, and in doing so, a clear message has been sent to the community that their children do not matter as much as others. So it's beyond time for excuses. Young people deserve more than the soundbite, photo opportunity, broken promises, years of delayed decision-making, and business cases that seem to take forever. The young people of Squez deserve real committed investment to their well-being. They deserve the dignity of being treated as a priority rather than as an afterthought. It stands as a damning symbol of a government that has failed in its most basic duty, which is to nurture and protect the next generation. And if ministers cannot find the planning, resources and commitment to deliver on promises made over 10 years ago, then it's little wonder that trust in government continues to collapse. The attitude towards improving facilities lies not in the shortage of money, but in the shortage of political will. A lick of paint, which is what they have received in the youth centre, is not a substitute for redevelopment. So I proposed this amendment because I really wanted to test if it was possible for the government to consider and change its mind, to see if resources could be rescheduled between Fort Regent and Squez so that we can begin the revitalisation of youth services in the area. I'm asking for flexibility, and I'd like to propose 2 options to the Council of Ministers if they care to consider them. Firstly, would government consider revisiting the scheduling of the Fort Regent investment so that some of the allocation intended for Squez can be brought forward sooner rather than later? This will have the effect of demonstrating a genuine commitment to the community that government is interested in developing facilities for them in the area. Or, let me put another option. Would they consider facilitating a discussion with SOJDC to see if they could incorporate redevelopment work into their capital programme around Fort Regent? I've seen this kind of proposition made in other jurisdictions, particularly where, for example, supermarkets build their premises in local communities and offer redevelopment of community facilities as part of their social value contribution, or where roads have been created to provide new access routes into towns and villages. So there are options available, sir, and I would hope that this amendment is not closed down and the signal that the computer says no does not reappear again this time round. I'm asking the Council of Ministers to think about it and explore if we can obtain a win-win. I move the amendment and call for the debate.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Deputy Ferry.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the development to Squez Youth Centre are within the budget for 2028 and 2029, where there is a total allocation of £7.5 million earmarked for the development of that site. The Minister and I have confirmed that this project has been rescheduled intentionally to focus on and dovetail with the new Town Youth Centre, which is progressing well. The Minister and I also took the opportunity to visit Squez Youth Centre one evening and to have a look around and meet with the staff and the young people who were in attendance. And there were over 35 that night, sir, all enjoying themselves and all definitely enjoying the environment within the club, as were the staff and youth workers. I think the last time I spoke on this subject, sir, I said that we're unable to do everything everywhere all at once. And the reprofiling of this is logistical and tactical to ensure there is always a town's youth centre within the town Everons to accommodate young people throughout the delivery phase of both projects. We have undertaken some minor improvement on the outside of the centre, which the Deputy mentioned in her speech, and currently we are undertaking some further internal decorations. And as with any youth service properties, ongoing maintenance and improvement works will be undertaken as business as usual until the new development actually takes place. But in the meantime, sir, the project is safe, it is vibrant, and it is functioning extremely well. So on that basis, sir, I urge members to reject this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else to speak on this amendment? Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. I rise today to speak as somebody who spent a lot of my childhood in Squez Youth Club. It's somewhere I have very many happy memories of, and actually is probably the reason I'm in Jersey to start with, given that my mum took a job and moved us to the island to be the youth worker at Squez Youth Club. I've got very fond memories of helping to build, I say helping, I was quite young. I probably caused more trouble than actually helped, but two internal rooms within the youth club because they were running out of space and it wasn't very functional. And actually it was down to a group of volunteers, and I remember them, everybody marching in with the pieces of wood and the tools to get on with it over the course of a weekend. And that's what it was. The youth workers, their families, a few supporters of the club helped to build those rooms. I don't know whether they're still there today or not, 30 years on. But it's that spirit of getting on and doing what you need to do. I think that is, when I meet youth workers today, I'd say it's a character of youth workers, that they work in not always the best settings actually, but they just get on. And the vibrancy often comes from the people, from the young people themselves and the people working with them. This youth clubs and youth centres, youth work, whether it's in a building or not in a building, is important to our island everywhere, our community everywhere. I think it's particularly important in communities like down at Squez, where you have large numbers of homes in close proximity as well. And I do think, as with the proposer, as I think alluded to and probably said outright, I do think there is a risk here that there is a community in this part of our island that feels forgotten about. And I say that as somebody who has been party to discussions about the Helier sports facilities in recent years as well. And that was reprofiled, pushed on, changed, and now I don't think is anywhere on anybody's to-do list currently. So there is a risk there, and I think it's important to raise that. Something I'd really like to just highlight and suppose add some thoughts to. The comments from the Council of Ministers refer to the relative proximity to the flagship town youth centre at Ann Street. And I appreciate Deputy Ferry's points that he's just made on this and the strategic thinking behind that as well. And it does say that the comments go on to say that the relative proximity means it does have implications for the facilities required at Liskean and so on and so forth. I completely support the town project and really recognise the need for it and the ongoing need for it that there has been for a long time. But I suppose it's just a word of caution, really. I don't want to see that narrative that because there's a flagship town youth centre, it means we don't need others or we don't need to invest in others in the future. I had a conversation with some young people not so long ago in my own constituency about youth clubs and youth facilities. And I asked them why they didn't go to one down the road, because in my view, it had better facilities, it had a better sports hall, more room to play football, it was more modern, and so on and so forth. And they looked at me as if I was suggesting something truly awful. And actually, you know, they like to visit it, they've got friends there, and they want to go and they'll do things together sometimes, but actually their local club, even if it is the most basic thing with the oldest sofa in the corner that somebody's donated that's got holes in it or whatever, that's their local club. And young people, without wanting to, well, I am speaking on their behalf because I've spoken to them and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I really felt from those young people, they have a really strong sense of identity. And I think sometimes as adults, we forget that. A lot of us in this assembly, you know, really value the parish system and our local parishes. And although young people may experience it and show it in slightly different ways to how we do, they have that really strong sense of identity too. So it's a word of caution, really, that I absolutely support, you know, the town project. And as a young person who asked my parents to drive me around the island to all sorts of different youth clubs at different times, I recognise that young people will probably come from across the island to it at different points. But I still think it's really important that we have those in the heart of local communities as well for young people. I'm grateful to, I'm actually not sure yet how I'm going to vote on this amendment, but I do think it's really important that Deputy Wilson has brought it. I think I don't want her to be put off that it's the second time that she's brought it, and I think it's important to keep banging the drum for your local community in this way. And I just hope that if this amendment isn't passed today, that ministers do stand by their ongoing commitment to proceed with the project from 2028 and start to get the work in train that we're told needs to be in place before the money can be allocated. And I'm sure that Deputy Wilson and others will be doing their best to hold them to it, and I'll have my voice there as well when needed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. I'm in a bind with this particular amendment, sir, because the last time that the Deputy brought this proposition, the town school, youth centre still wasn't concrete, it still wasn't solidly in place. So the idea to take the funding from that was something that I couldn't support because it would be impacting on St Helier, sir. Now, obviously, that project is firmly underway and there's not going to be turning back and is going to be delivered, which is incredible. Really, really looking forward to that being open and ready to go. And at the time, I remember saying that I support the idea of Liskean needing to be revitalised. I mean, we've seen huge amounts of development in that area. Not only was Le Marais existing and all the houses that are around there, but we've also got the new Samurai estate, which is now very much full and has a requirement for young people to have somewhere to go in that area. So I absolutely support the redevelopment and the uplift of Liskean Youth Centre. My issue is, and which is kind of causing me a little bit of a dilemma at the moment, is that because the town youth centre isn't finished, I always wonder how much government is able to deliver at one time. Will they be able to deliver both these projects in a quick enough time frame that the children that currently use Liskean, because as far as we're aware at the moment, it is a safe, it's not modern, it could do with improvements, but it is at least safe, it is at least somewhere they can go and use. And so I personally, I feel that this would be better once the town youth centre is complete, because then we talk about relative distance in Jersey. We're an island but 9 by 5, so I mean everywhere's relatively close. As Deputy Stevenson has just said, it's not. It might be a slight inconvenience to parents her to have to drive around town to get you to one youth club to another, but it's not hours out of someone's way. We're in minutes. So I am also in a bind because I also don't want anything to interrupt the project of Fort Regent. This is a historic building that firmly sits within my district, and we're getting complaints that all the sports teams have been moved out. They wonder why something couldn't have been done in phases in that building. But of course, I appreciate, sir, they're looking for asbestos. We've got potential Legionella in the water supply, we've got dodgy electrics. It is just quicker, safer, and cheaper to move everybody out, get these problems solved. Let the next phase of that project come in and start, so we can get that Fort Regent back as an operational building, at least washing its face, as the Minister for Infrastructure says, and actually have that as a proper leisure complex for the island. So I am struggling because I would have liked to have seen this money maybe allocated for 2027 rather than 2026, because then I feel that the youth centre in town would have been finished. The children who use Lescape would then have the option to come to the Helier Youth Centre if they wanted to. But so this is not an easy decision, which is why I'm going to vote on this, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Barbara Ward.
Thank you, sir. As a fellow deputy for St Clement's, I do feel support for Deputy Wilson and for the parishioners. But again, I'm in a dilemma, I do support...
Sorry, is someone attending remotely? Who was that? Do we know?
Sorry, me. I think that was me, sir. I'd had my mic on by mistake.
All right. You can mute your mic. Yes.
Sorry, I'll start again. Thank you. If I may. Yes, Deputy for St Clement's, I do feel support for my fellow deputy and parishioners. But again, sir, I'm in a dilemma because obviously I want to go with the government, but also I want to support my fellow deputy and parishioners, and especially the children. Yes, we're pleased that there is some guarantee of funding from 2028, but I would ask that, because it'll be a new government then, is they would give very serious consideration in bringing that forward, as my fellow colleague has said, to 2027, so that planning they can actually start looking at what is needed. It wouldn't be necessarily putting spades in the ground, but getting the right plans. Leaving it to 2028 is really pushing it down the road. But I would urge that serious positive consideration is given to bringing this monies and the project forward by 1 year to 2027. And that's all I have to say, sir. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister for Treasury and Resources.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I'm sorry I've lost my notes and we'll have to rely on my phone, so please bear with me. Sir, I would like to clarify some of the financial implications of this amendment. The amendment brings forward funding for Lescape, but does so by diverting attention from the Fort Regent project. As drafted, the amendment seeks to repurpose certain approvals for Fort Regent in order to accelerate work at Lescape. However, as we've already discussed this week, the works at Fort Regent will be funded through borrowing, and this amendment does not alter those approvals. Borrowing is not something we undertake lightly. In the case of Fort Regent, borrowing was justified by the need to prevent further deterioration of the site and was supported by a clear plan for servicing interest and eventual repayment. One of the guiding principles of that plan is a restrained approach to borrowing. Consequently, any expenditure for Lescape would need to be funded from the consolidated fund. This would result in a negative balance by the end of 2026, a position that would ultimately require rectification. While I understand the good intentions behind this proposal, I cannot support borrowing for this particular project. Its scale is such that it should be delivered within a prioritised capital programme. Indeed, it has already been prioritised and funding is available in the years when it will actually be required. While the amendment implicitly suggests that borrowing approved for Fort Regent could be repurposed for Liscay, it does not make that change, and we only borrow for purposes explicitly agreed by this Assembly. Therefore, as it stands, we could not and would not borrow to pay for Liscay. This means the expenditure would fall into the consolidated fund, which, as I have said, would push it into deficit in both 2026 and 2027. That is not a position we can accept. So, as a result, the amendment has a technical flaw. Even if that flaw was corrected by amendment, the under rationale is not completely sound, and for these reasons I cannot support it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Minister for Infrastructure.
Thank you, sir. So I can fully understand why Deputy Wilson is seeking to accelerate money for the redevelopment of Liscay Youth Club. The Deputy is quite rightly seeking to represent the interests of her parish and her constituents. Unfortunately, in my view, though, sir, it's a flawed amendment which would not accelerate the project at Liscay and indeed would only serve to delay work at Fort Regent. And as the Deputy said, sir, it's a sense of déjà vu, because we had the similar debate last year. So in response to last year's debate, the Council Ministers confirmed that the project at Liscay would recommence in 2028, and this budget does allocate the funding to meet that commitment. In his remarks, Deputy Ferry also set out the programme of work for the youth facilities and the need to prioritise. Sir, we cannot do everything at once as much as we would like to do. The Town Youth Centre, where no provision currently exists, has to be the priority above the redevelopment of an existing facility at Liscay, which is functional and is fit for purpose, although clearly it could be improved upon. It is not perfect. There are improvements to make, but it is a good facility and enjoyed by a good number of young people. So I believe further improvements could be made, and I think I mentioned this last year, such as by giving access to the all-weather pitch at the school. So it just needs some lights, sir, and a bit of creative thinking, and we could give young people more space to run around. It's lying there dormant night after night. The project in town will also impact on the future provision that's required at Liscay, so it is logical, again, to complete that project first. Fundamentally, because the programme of works which we have previously set out, which we also wish to stick to, there is not a project for Liscay on which we can spend £4.5 million in 2026. The Liscay project's at the feasibility stage, with detailed design works still to take place and the planning process yet to be undertaken. This is the position we've previously set out, sir, and we are being consistent. Therefore, it is simply a fact that the money proposed for 2026 would remain largely unspent. It simply wouldn't be possible to get spades in the ground. So Deputy Stevenson spoke about La Rocquiere, and we are hoping, sir, to work in partnership with the parish, and we've started discussions, I'm sure the Constable can confirm this, around providing play facilities and also looking at enhancing the outdoor courts. So we're working with the school and we hope to cover some of the courts if possible in the very near future. So concurrently, this proposal would put a dent in the proposals at Fort Regent and very likely delay that vital project. So arguably the biggest winners from a redeveloped and revitalised Fort Regent will be our young people from across the island, including those youngsters who live in St Clement's. So this amendment does not serve their interests in this regard either. So we need to get on with the projects at Fort Regent as quickly as possible so we can stick to the target of reopening the fort at the end of 2028. So the Treasury Minister explained, perhaps in a different way to how I'll explain, sir, but another reason for rejecting this, sir, is that phase one of the fort funding will come from borrowing. Borrowing that the Deputy voted against on Monday. And if I can go back to Deputy Gorst's jars, I think he may have inherited these from the former Constable of St Martin, the loan for the fort will be exactly that, a loan for the fort, we won't be able to siphon off money for other projects. Sir, members rejected a similar amendment last year, and I ask the Assembly again sticks to the course. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister.
Sir, can I ask a point of order, I think, or it might be a question to the SG? It just regards the points that have been made in relation to the loan element of this. I'm slightly surprised if it is impossible to enact that it was approved, and I wondered if there was any clarification from you on whether something could be approved if it was effectively impossible to enact. But the question might be better directed to the SG in terms of, is it actually in ultra-virus, in a sense?
Yes, question I think for the Solicitor General.
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to apologise because I wasn't actually listening to this part of the debate. I was dealing with an email on another matter. So I'm afraid I haven't followed it and I'm not sure what I'm being asked to assist with. I'm sorry.
Do you want to answer your question, ask a question at greater length? So
Yes, sir. So the Treasury Minister, as I understand it, said that this amendment would not be possible to do because the law says that we can only borrow money if the Assembly gives authorisation for that specific purpose. And since the amendment asks for the money to be lent, if you like, to the Squez project, it would therefore not be possible, would not be legal. I don't know if I've summarised the Minister's position correctly there, but that was my understanding of it. And I just wanted to check whether that is a legal barrier, in which case I don't think there's much point in carrying on with the debate, frankly, or whether it's more of a political barrier, if you like.
Do you wish to consider that and revert in a moment?
Yes, please.
Yes. Right, St Clement.
Thank you, sir. We have been here before, and I admit that, but you cannot expect the constable to capitulate. We have a parish with 10,500 residents. I've said this before, squeezed into 4.5 kilometres square. We've heard from the Constable of Grouville that out east, it is barren land as far as entertainment and facilities for our youngsters and our teenagers. We have very little. We have made successes with the Clos-Moran and the St Clement's Community Hub. Mental health, the best community services on island, and we have produced increased financial help for the many families in St Clement's who need it through our trusts and benefactors. But it's not enough. The youth of St Clement's and Grouville and the East are crying out for more to do. And we know what happens when youth don't have enough to do. They find something a little bit different to occupy their time. Parishioners and our municipality have been teased with a vision of a £70 million Le Rocquier redevelopment, and then a £40 million redevelopment, and now we might, if we're lucky, get an all-weather football pitch. We are in talks with Infrastructure Minister, and I'm grateful to that, to develop a first-class children's playground in Le Rocquier, but this will take time, and time is what we're talking about. For all of these reasons, it cannot be a surprise that the Constable will vote for a quicker response. I believe from the talks we had with the Chief Minister about a year ago that there actually is £4.5 million sitting in a bank account allocated to Le Squez Redevelopment Youth Project. So I'd like verification of that, because that is what we were told, I think, at our meeting, Deputy Wilson. So it's there. We don't have to take it from Fort Regent. It was voted on in a previous budget, and I'm quite happy to be corrected, but I'm very much happier to be proved right. And for those reasons, I'll be voting for the amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. And I'm reading back through Hansard from last year's similar debate. And in doing so, I realise, as it's easy to forget what one says, I expressed a challenge, I think, to use this year's language from Deputy Coles, a bind on it. And one of the reasons was deliverability. It's a really challenging position we're put in here, because we've just heard from the Minister for Infrastructure that in all likelihood there is no way to spend £4.5 million on Lusquet in 2026. It's disappointing, 1 year on, that no time was put into perhaps pre-application advice, earlier consultation with the community, and I think I made this point in 2024, sir, looking at the 2025 budget. I highlighted that it was unlikely the budget could be spent in 2025 as it was, because we didn't have plans. But what would have been more pragmatic would be if the department worked on ensuring plans were there, because shovel-ready projects would be a really good place to be. But I also highlighted, sir, that one of the important things that government needs to do, and this assembly, I should say, is our responsibility, what we need to do, is we do need to be honest. And we need to make sure that when we commit money, we are committing it in the full knowledge that it can be spent, or we are likely to deliver on what we are offering. And to look back, I said every time in any part of our capital programme and wider programme we shift tack, then we erode trust. It is incumbent on anyone in charge of government to consider where stability lies in this. And then I quoted Hansard's from 2023, so I clearly have a habit of this, so I apologise. But our real challenge, sir, is I do not believe we can see the government deliver £4.5 million of capital delivery. Offices for the Minister for Infrastructure often tell us that the capital plan is out of date the moment it is set. And whilst there's an element of that, good capital planning should have trust in it. It should have pragmatism and realism and a good evidence base. So I'm really struggling to see how I support this. I further struggle because, as members heard earlier in the week, I am fundamentally and completely opposed to further borrowing for facilities such as Fort Regent. And the words of the Treasury Minister make that exactly how I read the situation, and I do not want to see any borrowing on facilities like this. And I'm willing to say that the Minister for Infrastructure highlighted there are more things we can do to provide facilities. We hear these lines again and again, and we do just have to sometimes say, let people play, let FB Field be used for a greater number of hours, accept the wear on the pitches, accept that maybe imperfect grass, but a happier community is a better way of using that site than making it pristine. Those are all things we have to do. But for this year, for the allocations, I am struggling to support this because I do not want to say to my parishioners, I do support a facility, we will have spending, and then tell them in 2026, but I knew it wasn't possible.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Mosek.
Thank you, sir. I won't speak for too long. Like other members who've spoken before, I absolutely commend and respect Deputy Wilson for bringing this. It's vital in our system that local communities, as well as just the island-wide community, have a voice to represent them in this assembly and keep pushing and pushing to get their needs as a community met. And it's been a very good example of that kind of local representation, the work that has led to the St Helier Youth Centre, which is now is proceeding with full steam ahead and will be delivered soon enough. That started with the then newly elected deputy for St Helier Central, Deputy Ward, who brought an amendment, I think it was to the CSP at the time, to get initial commitment for that, and has tenaciously fought in support of that. Deputy Catherine Curtis, as chair of the panel, brought an amendment to the CSP this time round from last year to keep that on the agenda as well. So there's been a lot of team effort to get to that point, and it's great to see it proceeding. And I absolutely can understand why, when looking at the Squez Youth Centre, being impatient and wanting things to proceed quicker. Of course, you would want that when you see young people in that area not being served as well as they ought to be with the quality of facilities that they deserve. And I would hope nobody would disagree with that. But I'll be maintaining a consistent position on the amendment itself because I have faith that the proposal to move ahead with that project in 2028 will be met. and I'm not convinced that arbitrarily bringing it forward would actually speed up the delivery of it for all the reasons that other members have said, and the focus on delivering the St Helier facility being the immediate project going on now. But having made that point, I do think I want to put on record not just my own position, but I know it's absolutely the position of my party colleagues, that delivering better youth facilities at Luscay absolutely should be in the pecking order of priorities. And if anything were to slip for timing from 2028, or a genuine viable prospect came to bring some of that forward, if it were possible, then I would want us to support that wholeheartedly. And I'm happy, even though at this moment in time, sir, though I hope it won't be the case in 6 months' time, we have no direct representation as a party in St Clement. It will certainly be our position as a party to support the young people in St Clement and maintain the timeline for that project, and it will have our wholehearted support. And if things look like they're slipping, we will be part of the move to bring that back on track. But at the moment, sir, because it is scheduled in a way that we're happy with, then we would want that. We wouldn't want other work disrupted in order to achieve that. But that's on record now. Hold us to account for it, that we support projects going ahead at the Luscay, and that will have our support when we're ready for it.
Thank you, Deputy. Solicitor General.
So I'm sorry I wasn't ready to deal with the matter when I was first asked. I'm looking at Article 9 of the Public Finances Law at paragraph 2. I don't think there's an issue around Viries for reasons I'll explain. 9.2 provides that the government plan must set out the amount of any proposed financing to be obtained for the next financial year. Now, if the government plan as is sets out financing for the particular project, that is to say, Fort Regent, it seems to me it's within the, it is not ultra vires to lodge an amendment that seeks to change the level of borrowing that is apportioned to that project, and to suggest by amendment that a proportion is spent on a different project. What that would mean, if adopted, however, is that any shortfall in the funding for Fort Regent, it seems to me, would have to be met from the consolidated fund, or if the Luscay project were not to be funded by financing, the Luscay project would have to be funded from the consolidated fund. But I don't think an issue of Viries arises. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else to speak on the amendment? Deputy Catherine Curtis, then O'Connell Time. Yes.
Thank you, sir. When Deputy Wilson brought a similar proposition or amendment on Luscay last year, I couldn't support it due to needing to prioritise the town youth centre. I would have liked to support it, but bearing in mind that there was no main youth centre for children in town, I had to prioritise that. However, I am happy to support Deputy Wilson this time. I visited the Luscay Youth Centre and I understand that there has been feasibility work. I don't really see why it can't be brought forward if the will is there. The Children Education and Home Affairs panel brought a successful amendment several years ago around improvements at Levies, and we've waited a long time for those improvements. It does seem that projects in the east of the island never seem to happen. Therefore, I think it would be good to get something more definite in place for this Luscay project, and we'll support it.
Thank you, Deputy. Constable Greville.
Yes, sir. Thank you. On Thursday, the 2nd of November 2023, an infamous day indeed, we had a new youth worker arrive at the Gorey Youth Club. His name was Kieran. And for those of you who remember what happened on the 2nd of November that year, it was the aftermath of the storm. And I'm just hoping now that he's been transferred to the Luscay Youth Club that this storm doesn't hit that particular club when he arrives. But he's a wonderful youth worker, has done wonderful work at the Gorey Youth Centre, and I wish him well in his new career. As the chair of my panel has already said, we had the honour of visiting both the St Helier project and the Luscay project, And both of them, especially the St Helier project in its infancy, shall we say, looks incredibly impressive. And it's a marvellous bit of work, and I congratulate all of those who are involved in it. We did also visit Squez, and sir, it looks a little tired, but it certainly has 2 more years left in it before the potential redevelopment happens. And I think that the facility that it provides will be much enhanced by their new youth worker, but it certainly has the potential to carry on for a little while longer, in my opinion, sir. So I can't support this amendment.
Thank you, Tom. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. And this is just a little bit of a riff on my original Meanwhile Youth speech, and I just want to remind people what was said then. I'm increasingly concerned, sir, for the health and well-being of our teenage population. CAMS currently have 1,983 young people with open cases. The number of new cases being referred to them is 100 per month. That comes with a price tag of just over £6 million per annum to health. What are we doing to stop this disaster? Too many suitable spaces have been closed down and not replaced in the meantime. Fort Regent at the end of this year, the skate park over 18 months ago, Amazing Maze, Tampa Park, the list is long. Why is it we have so much trouble hearing what our young people have to say? Never before have we needed action today for our teenage population. The evidence is right in front of us. If we choose to look at it, we have an existential problem with our teenage population today. We're not great at using data in this assembly, but here is some. In the CAMS annual report of 2024, the number of young people open to CAMS at the end of 2024 was 1,949. Back in 2019, before COVID, that number was just 721. The problem has nearly tripled in size. Tripled. We have an existential problem. In addition, the waiting list is now for diagnosis up to 2 years. Never forget that behind every statistic is a real human being, a family in crisis, a child in crisis. Surely we need to be doing something now. Therefore, I'll be backing the Deputy's proposition amendment.
Thank you, Deputy. Chief Minister.
We recognise, sir, the challenges that Deputy War has just mentioned. We recognise that our young people need more investment, and that's why I'm pleased to say that this government has put more investment in the last 2 years, or planned more investment to support young people than we have done for many, many years. And the Constable of St Clement, and I think if I was the Constable of St Clement or a Deputy in St Clement, I'd be fighting hard for this, like they're quite right to do. And I had a really good visit last year, and I'll come to that in a second. 11,500 people in St Clement's, 40,000, I think, in St Helier. What do we have in St Helier? Very, very little. Practically nothing to support the youth, and that's why there is a big investment going into the new St Helier youth facilities. And I wish we had the funds available to do St Clement at the same time, or bring it forward. And I said that, I enjoyed the visit last time, and I did say we would do everything we can to do St Clement's as quickly as we can. And what we've put in the budget is, as I think, as quickly as we can do it, not just because of the logistics of the planning that need to be done, but because of the funding and the fact that we have prioritised St Helier simply because there's hardly anything in St Helier for the youth, where St Clement's facility does need investments, but it is at the moment a good, well-used, well-run, valuable facility. So we're asking St Clement to hold on for a little while, because we will get there. And I want to align myself to Deputy Mezek's words about being held to account. Well, of course, we can all make good intentions, and this is more than a good intention from this government's past. This is a genuine commitment, as far as we are concerned, to get that work done in St Clement and support the deputies and the constables and the parishioners and the youth to have better facilities there. I remember growing up in St Helier. I lived in St Saviour's Road. We had Aquila and Seaton and a number of youth clubs. The Rev, who went to the Revolution? Anybody remember that? Probably, yes. The Singing Postman from Grouville. Who said there's no entertainment in Grouville? I think I'd have to disagree with that. I know, don't forget the new facility of Oakfield now. The infrastructure minister might say that is technically in the east of the island. Well, it's sort of on the outskirts of town, but it is in a better and a more convenient place for the east. And going to St Helier facility, the big hub in St Helier, I know it's more convenient for people who live in St Helier, but it is a facility for youth of the whole island to go to and utilise. I think if I can just refer back to the Treasury Minister's comment about borrowing, and I think what she did mean, and she can kick me under the table if I'm wrong, is that we can't borrow for one thing and then use it on another. I can't imagine what the CNAG and Deputy Gardner would say about that when they had a look back. So I think that's what we were saying. If we borrow for something, we have to use it for that thing. So I commend all the deputies of the parish and the constable for fighting for this. I want to reassure them that this government is behind them. The timing is a bit difficult because the financial restraint we find ourselves in, and I hope I've explained the rationale for just putting the youth facility in St Helier ahead of St Clement at this stage. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Rob Ward.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And it was some years ago when I was a young, aspiring member of the Assembly. It was St Helier District 2, actually, so you got that one wrong. And yes, we brought an amendment. And the reason I mention that is it took years after that amendment was taken for the work to happen. I spent a long time, and I do sort of, I say to the deputy who's brought this amendment, I feel your pain, because I've been there. But I do have to say that the relief that the St Helier Youth Facility is now being built is palpable for me, and I think it's such an important thing in such a densely populated area of St Helier, and that's really important. The SCAE does have a facility. Of course it can be better, but I agree with the Constable of Grooville. I think it has got some more time in it. I will say to Deputy War, I have to say to Deputy War, he's right, we do have to make sure we have these facilities, but that's why we have the youth facility in the centre of St Helier. It's also why we needed to not vote against the money for Fort Regent, but the Deputy may have done that the other day. So we have to be consistent in what we're doing here. We do need to redevelop those, and it's that investment that will tell for the future. So I always think there should be a pragmatism in government, and if there's any way to move something forward, I would support that as well. I think I said that in the last debate. I think this is a better debate because it's not pitching one. I think before there was an element of pitching one parish against the other to get something built, and I think it went down that way. And this isn't doing that. It's looking at money from Fort Regent, and I get that. And plus, we're also in the position of actually having something being built, which I think is really, really important. And I will remind members that there is no youth facility in the centre of St Helier. I know we have the park, but there is not a specific youth facility, and indeed, because of that lack of facility, it's what's creating some of the problems in the park. We don't have the proper facilities nearby for young people to go to. But that's all there is. Once that's built, that's going to make a massive difference. And of course, when we build the new school, which will be open to the public, because it'll be purpose-built in order to do that, there will be even more facilities with a 5G pitch or 4, I don't know, I can never remember how many Gs these pitches are nowadays. So, but there will be a pitch on top as well. That's a coordinated and joined up approach to producing facilities for people, and I think that's really, really important. And I also say, I'm good to hear Deputy Alex Curtis talk about just running around in the fields. I thought he was going to say jumpers for goalposts, because that's what occurred to my mind. And he's quite right. There is some simplicity here. Let's open, and we are working. I am working with the infrastructure minister to really open up our schools. The challenges with some is they were not designed to do that, and so you have to open up the entire building. That's why when we design new schools, we have to do it properly. So I can't support this amendment at the moment, but I understand the need. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. Like Deputy Coles, I am quite sympathetic to this proposition in many ways. And I also have to say that in a lot of ways I see St Clement as basically the eastern twin of St Bullard's. We have many things in common as a constituency in a parish, and we're both southern coastal districts with strong urban areas, perhaps a bit more countryside in St Brelard, but there is, of course, a backdrop in St Clement as well, sir. And I think both have youth facilities that are vital for the suburban areas of St Brelard and St Clement, so there are strong similarities. And even though St Clement's is perhaps a bit closer to town, I think Deputy Stevenson earlier gave us a good analogy about how, you know, it might just be a bus ride or a short walk away, but it's still not your youth facility. But of course, we're not comparing one with the other, and we're not pitting one facility against the other here, thankfully. What makes me want to support this potentially is the fact that we have the Chief Minister giving ministerial support to this in principle, saying that, you know, we can give a commitment to this, but this is only this government. This government can't speak for whatever will happen after June 2026 next year. So only some 6 months away now, there will be a new government forming, and the commitments of this government, as well intentioned and I'm sure as honest as they are not necessarily worth anything in terms of the deliverability. And the second, I think, compelling argument that might make me want to support this as well is the fact that it's much easier for a future government to renege on any commitment that this Assembly or this government gives to Luscay than it is for them to renege on commitment to Fort Regent. I think the Fort Regent development is now in some ways a juggernaut, and quite rightly, you know, I think we're all optimistic about what may take place at Fort Regent, and I think that train has left the station, and it's a case of what we will see up there, not if we will see anything. And it would be much easier for that money to be replaced. I think if this money is removed, some more money will magically appear, and as and when it's needed for Fort Regent to go ahead. I'm not so sure that if there were a competition for funds in the future, that money would be so easily found for Luscay. So I leave my thoughts there, sir, and I look forward to any further comments from the mover of the proposition in summing up.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Wilson.
Thank you, sir. And first of all, thank you to everybody for their contribution and their measured thoughts on this amendment. I'll try and go through each of the points that I've captured here. One of the things that we've been hearing about is the notion of equity when it comes to provision of youth facilities in the island. And I'm pleased to say that we've actually moved on from that kind of adversarial debate that we had last year between St Helier and the needs of St Clement. Having said that, I think it still doesn't address the fact that we're still stuck with an issue. And whilst I accept that Deputy Ferry has mentioned that the project is safe, similarly Deputy Conoptable-Labbe, the thing is that if you speak to the young people, they want something to be done. And this amendment was really about asking, could it be done sooner rather than later? The issue around the promises that have been made before, the Conotab of St Clement talked about how many times we've been promised facilities in the area. And we might just get a football pitch this time. I think that sort of really goes to the heart of my amendment, is that we don't want to have a begging bowl for St Clement. We don't want to be considered an afterthought. We actually want to see that commitment becoming real. And one of the things that I think was really interesting to hear about is why there cannot be flexibility in the way this project could be funded. And, you know, I'm grateful to Deputy Renner for seeking clarification on the technicalities around the borrowing in relation to Fort Regent and this project. Personally, I think we could have been a bit more creative. I think we could have looked at whether the investment in Luscay would have brought a return over that period of time. And I certainly believe that given what we're told about the rates of borrowing, that we probably wouldn't have needed to have spent more if we committed to it this time than we might actually end up paying for in 2 or 3 years' time. One of the other issues, I think, was I accept Deputy Alex Curtis's idea that, you know, maybe we should just get people running around and playing and being in the open air. But on a Friday night when it's teeming and when you're standing in the doorway with young people on the Friday night, desperate to get into the youth centre, it really brings home to you just how important it is to have a facility that can provide for all weathers and not just when it's raining. One of the things that we have been trying to talk about in the community development group is if we, as a group of people who are interested to support youth development in the area, is whether we can personally explore any other ways of trying to secure capital or investment in this project. And I don't particularly want to just leave this project, or this amendment. I'm well aware that it may well not be supported today, but I do want to reflect some of the commitments and intentions that have been made by Deputy Mezek and other colleagues around the Assembly, that the commitment is there. And I would like us to look at some of the options that we could explore if we can't develop the project on the basis of which this amendment is brought forward. I do think we need to be more agile. I do think we need to be more creative. It feels very linear in terms of the way that we do things. And I suppose what I'm looking for is some sort of enterprise, some sort of innovation to actually try and address what I think is quite an intransigent issue. I don't really want to feel what Deputy Ward's pain. I'm feeling it now, but I don't want to feel it for too much longer. I want to feel joy, you know. I want to share in the joy that young people experience when something happens for them. And so I do welcome the support from Deputy Tadier and Deputy Catherine Curtis and the commitment made by Deputy Mezek that in the event in 6 months' time that this might be an election issue on which they would like to campaign, then I would be very happy to see at least the profile of the needs of young people being promoted in the area. So I think I'll leave it at that. Well, one of the things that, if I could just finally comment on, is what this amendment does is it highlights the lack of responsiveness to requests that come from the people. And I'll just leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the appel called for? Appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. can announce the amendment has been rejected. 14 votes pour, 29 votes conch, and 1 abstention. Yes.
Those voting pour, the Conotop of St Clement and deputies Doublé, Gardner, Coles, Wall, Miles, Renouf, Catherine Curtis, Jearn, Barbara Ward, Wilson, Stevenson, and online deputies Tadier and the Conotop of St Bon. Those voting contre, the Conotabs of St Helier, St Brallard, Trinity, St John, Grouville, St Mary, St Saviour, and deputies Southern, Labby, Luce, Morale, Lahegara, Ayer, Ward, Alves, Gorst, Farnham, Moore, Mezek, Horay, Scott, Feltham, Rose Binet, Howell, Tom Binet, Ferry, Kovac, Alex Curtis, and online Deputy Andrews. And Deputy Balash abstained.
Yes.
So can I apologise? I was distracted and I somehow omitted to vote. I apologise.
Thank you. The next matter for consideration is the 21st Amendment, lodged by Deputy Gardner. Now it's the greffier to read the amendment.
Paragraph B8. After the words summary tables 5.1 and 2 of the report, insert the words, except that in summary table 5.2, there should be inserted a new row entitled Neighbourhood Regeneration of St Helier, with an allocation of 167,000 to each of 2026, 27 and 28, and a corresponding decrease for each year to the row titled Infrastructure, Rolling Vote and Public Realm. B7, after the words in the appendix to the accompanying report, insert the words except that A. On page 60, after the words to revitalise St Helier, there should be inserted a new paragraph as follows. The budget allocates 167,000 in each of 2026, 27 and 28 to provide funding for the specific regeneration of St Helier neighbourhoods, as previously agreed within the amendment to the 23rd Amendment to the proposed budget government plan 2025 to 28, and B, on page 60 in table 25, infrastructure, there should be inserted a new row entitled Neighbourhood Regeneration of St Helier with an allocation of 167,000 to each of 2026, 27 and 28, and a corresponding decrease for each year to the row entitled Infrastructure, Rolling Vote and Public Realm.
Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And as the Minister indicated yesterday to the Assembly, this amendment was accepted, so I'm sure that everyone will be happy to hear that I have a very short speech saying thank you to the Minister and the Council of Ministers for accepting this amendment. This small but meaningful decision will now allow parish and the infrastructure officers come together, sit together and plan next phase of neighbourhood improvement with certainty. As members know, funding is matching. Every pound committed by the government unlocks a pound from the parish and vice versa. The partnership model is already have known results. Halkett Place, Halkett Street, Pomona Road and others. Today's decision means those new projects can move forward. It's a practical step fully aligned with our shared commitment to revitalise St Helier and improve daily life for people who live in town. Thank you again to the Minister and the Council of Ministers to enabling this progress. It's a small amendment, but it will make a meaningful difference to people living in town.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the proposal seconded?
Yes, sir.
Minister.
Yes, sir. I just want to thank the Deputy for working with us, sir. Public realm isn't always popular, sir, but it's necessary. So it's a way of us extending the usable space within St Helier and other areas, and we look forward to continued partnership working with the parish. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. Just very briefly on this, as a St Helier deputy, I'm pleased with the position that everyone's arrived at on this. And the Minister just now said that public realm's not always popular. I've always found that bizarre. Surely places being nicer is a good thing. And actually, there's been a few projects recently that have been really good. Newcut in town, absolutely, is a million times better than what it was beforehand. And the reason for me standing, sir, is I wanted to commend the parish of St Helier for its neighbourhood improvement area schemes. that it has been focusing on in recent years, which has been a really welcome development, not just as a representative of St Helier, but someone who lives there and spends lots of time wandering about the place there, that they've been really good. And if this can open the door to more kind of projects like that to make the town and the outskirts of town, the neighbourhoods of town, more pleasant places for people to live, that's got to be a good thing. And in celebrating the success that the parish has had recently on that, I thought it was worth just highlighting. Of course, the constable has played a leading role on that, but he's been very ably supported by a CEO in the parish who is coming towards the end of his tenure, who's done an absolutely fantastic job, and I wanted to put that on record. I know I'm speaking on behalf of all St Helier deputies when I say how grateful we've been when we've had to raise constituency matters with him and work with him on some of these schemes as well. So let's hope to see more of that in the future.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Gardner.
Just to say thank you, and I join Deputy Mazik to thank you to the town CEO, and I'm sure all parishioners and our islanders will enjoy St Helier improvements because everyone coming to enjoy the capital and a call to the appel.
Thank you, Deputy. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce the amendment has been adopted unanimously, 42 votes for. The next amendment is the fifth amendment proposed by Deputy Coles. Deputy Coles, there is an amendment lodged by you to your amendment. Do you wish your proposition to be read as amended?
After much discussion with myself, sir, yes.
Is content for that to occur? Thank you. The greffier will read the proposition as amended.
Paragraph B. Sorry, my brain's gone. Paragraph B11. After paragraph B11, insert new paragraph B12. B12 to agree that the upper earnings limit as defined within Schedules 1A and 1B of the Social Security Jersey Law 1974 should be removed from 1st of January 2027, abolishing the upper earnings cap on Social Security contributions and increasing the closing balance of the relevant funds by 6 million, and redesignate the existing paragraphs accordingly. B11, after paragraph B11, insert the new paragraph B12. B12 to agree that the upper earnings limit as defined within Schedule 1C of the Social Security Jersey Law 1974 should be removed from 1st of January 2027, abolishing the upper earnings cap on long-term care contributions and increasing the closing balance of the relevant funds by 11 million, and redesignate the existing paragraphs accordingly.
Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. And I know we've been here before, but I will start by stating the obvious. The upper earnings limit applies to the contributions to both the Social Security Fund and Long-Term Care Fund. Part A of this amendment applies only to the employer's contributions to the Social Security Fund for their employees that earn over £317,000 per year. So only applies to employers. Part B of this amendment applies only to individuals with an annual income of over £317,000 per year and their contributions to the Long-Term Care Fund. I know that we've been here before, but what's the difference this time? Firstly, I have brought this amendment in parts and will be taking the vote in parts. This will allow members to decide whether they believe that one or more of the funds need extra contributions. Members will be able to decide, I think with I think with some of the comments and commentary, it is likely that all members will decide that both these funds do not need additional contributions. However, members have debated funds paid to the Social Security Fund as well as services funded by long-term care. So I'm someone that believes that society only exists when we all feel we're in it together and that contributions are made fairly. And that brings us to the questions of fairness and what is fair. To me, fairness when it comes to tax and contributions is in percentages. We set the numbers and everybody should be expected to pay and contribute that percentage in tax and social. But of course we haven't got the percentages balanced in Jersey. We have different levels of corporation tax, income tax, and of course contributions to social security and long-term care. As has been mentioned in recent questions and debates, questions have been raised in connection to successive governments adjusting the state's grant to the Social Security Fund and the current strength of the fund. Sir, I have no doubt that the fund is as strong and as secure as the Treasury and Social Security ministers have said. However, as we are in a time when there is demand on our tax revenues and they are being stretched, we need to consider other methods to securing income into the Social Security Fund, and this amendment, if adopted, would see roughly £6 million added to the fund each year. Okay, so the elephant in the room when it comes to employers' contributions is the outcry from the UK and the UK's government to decision to increase employers' contributions of national insurance. Okay, I acknowledge that that's happened. However, there's a big difference between that and what I'm proposing here. The Labour government increased employers' contributions from 13.8% to 15% on all national insurance contributions. There is no cap in the UK. I am simply proposing that we remove the cap, which will see employers, which sees employers stopping paying social security contributions into the fund. I know some in here will say that this is a tax on business and businesses. In my mind, sir, the cap has been a tax benefit to employers that we should no longer continue. I'm sure we will hear the argument that businesses will leave, but of course, this is just fear-mongering. The vast majority of these companies' employees earn well below the upper earnings limit and already pay the maximum contributions for these employees. We are only talking about companies paying an employee more than £317,000 a year. The comparison to the UK and the activity in recent budgets there is also a false narrative. If we compare the national insurance contributions versus social security, there is a massive difference. In the UK, an employee earning £320,000 a year, the employer would be expected to pay £47,250 a year. In Jersey, the employee earning the same £320,000 a year, the employer would be expected to pay £10,700 a year under our current model. Should this amendment be adopted, that would rise to £11,166 a year. There's still £36,084 less than the UK. When we consider our 0-10 corporate tax structure, businesses benefit from being here. By removing the upper earnings limit on employers' social security contributions, businesses are still benefiting from being here. With the extra £6 million generated for our social security fund, we will be better looking after our people into their old age. The fund will be stronger, last longer, and may be able to offer more to our pensioners. I strongly encourage members to support Part A and remove the upper earnings limit on employers' contributions to the Social Security Fund. Part B, sir. Now, I can appreciate why some members might be more reluctant to support this part of the amendment, as the Long-Term Care Fund, or LTC, is a means-tested benefit. It is safe to say that pretty much everyone that this amendment would impact will see no benefit from it. So I'm sure this will lead to members asking, why am I sticking with this amendment? Well, sir, on page 89 of the budget, we read that we can read about LTC and the government's plan for it in the coming years. The risk to the fund due to increasing costs and complexity of conditions into old age has led to the government providing estimates in the budget, sir, which will show that there is an increased percentage of contributions on all people paying into the fund of an additional 1%. That means that from January 2027, from next year, work is going to start to make the legislative changes that would see hard-working people from January 2027 starting to pay 2.5% on all of their taxable income, whilst leaving those who earn over £317,000 with the cap in place would not pay a penny more. Meaning that the more money earned in the lower meaning that the more that they earn, the lower the effective rate becomes. At the current rate, LTC is capped at £4,755. So someone with an income of £317,000 pays the same as somebody with an income of £500,000 or even £1 million. The person bringing in £500,000 only pays 0.95% of their income, while the millionaire only pays 0.47%. How can we, in good conscience, expect those struggling now to pay more when those bringing in the most are paying less by a percentage of their income? Sir, before we consider increasing the rate of LTC to secure the fund's future, we need to address the cap. So, sir, some members will be concerned that most of us in the Assembly will not receive much, if any, financial assistance from LTC. But think of those who do. Shouldn't we be able to treat, shouldn't everybody be able to be treated with dignity in their time of need, offer them help and support when they need it? Sir, the removal of the cap will mean government can reconsider the need to increase LTC across the board. Government can work on different avenues surrounding long-term care. I urge members to support Part B and prevent an increase in long-term care for the many and bring balance and fairness. So, sir, I'm going to keep it short, and I'll make my amendment there.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Who wishes to speak on the amendment? Deputy Bard-Ward.
It's not to speak to the amendment, it's just a point of clarification, please. I was saying that LTC is means tested. Could he give some further explanation as to what is meant by that? Because I thought LTC was based on how much you're earning. So if you could clarify that for us, sir.
Luke, is that the point of clarification?
Yes, sir, sorry, sir. Means testing is the wrong phrase. It is about how much assets somebody holds, what they're entitled to then claim back from the fund. If you have assets over a certain amount, then you no access, as I believe it, sir.
Minister for Treasury and Resources.
Thank you, sir. Sir, as the Deputy said, I somewhat feel I could have really shortcut this speech by just sending you all a link to the speeches that I made, I think, in 2022 and 2023 on this subject. And I'm slightly surprised we are discussing it again, because my recollection is that Deputy Mezek told us in 2024 that this would not come back in this term, but we all know it is a key part of the Reform Manifesto, which nobody has yet mentioned. Sir, as we are now clear, we have debated the upper earnings limit twice already during this term, and my position today is the same as it was on both of those occasions. Firstly, we should not be taking any action in respect of the upper earnings limit, or indeed any element of social security or long-term care contributions, until we have both the outcomes of the full reviews of the Social Security Fund and the Long-Term Care Fund that I believe the Minister for Social Security has already instructed. She has also instructed actuarial reviews, which will be very instructive in terms of what is required in those funds going forward. So the Social Security Fund is very healthy, as we have said repeatedly, and does not itself need more funding. I have no doubt that the Long-Term Care Fund will need contributions to be increased in the not too distant future, but simply asking a very small number of people to fund that, the required amounts, is not going to be enough. Everybody will have to pay more in due course. In any event, sir, implementing a major structural tax change via an amendment like this risks damaging Jersey's competitiveness and sends a wrong signal to businesses planning their future in the island, just at the time when we're doing a lot of work into seeking to enhance our competitiveness. We cannot assume that businesses think they're lucky to be here. We have got to fight for those businesses to remain, and we should not forget that. And there is an astonishing level of complacency in Deputy Cole's speech. They are not lucky to be here. We are lucky to have them. The amendment relies on revenue from a small, very mobile group of high earners on whom Jersey already heavily depends. If this amendment drives even a few of those taxpayers to leave or their employers to move business activity elsewhere, overall revenues could fall and not rise. And I am sure, sir, based on our earlier debates, that comment will cause Deputy Mezek or one of his colleagues to stand up later on and say, but of course you know young people are leaving this island. If these people leave the island, even more young people will leave because there will be nothing left for them here. We need this income in the island. And as for I think we can look to what's happened in the UK. Reports in the UK are that the increase in UK national insurance has led to a loss of 185,000 jobs in their economy. At the Question Time event last week, many people in that audience were concerned about our economy and what we were doing for it, and I have spoken about that briefly already. This sends entirely the wrong message to our business community. So long-term care is already progressive and is linked to income tax, so the fairness case is overstated. My understanding, and I admit I'm rusty, is that long-term care is a universal benefit available to everyone who needs it once they have paid an immediate share of some £60,000. Once they have paid care costs, £70,000, I'm now being told, once you have paid your care costs of up to £70,000, you then qualify. There is an amount that everybody has to pay, and once they've paid it, they are entitled to long-term care at the same rate as anybody else, subject to their care needs. They will not get the income support element, and they will not get the other elements if they can afford it, but they do get long-term care regardless of need. It's a universal benefit. Removing the upper earnings limit for Social Security is in effect, yes, you guessed it, a tax on employers for locating well-paid leadership jobs to Jersey. The upper earnings limit has already more than doubled since its introduction in 2012, from 150,000 to a planned 330,000 in 2026. This included a 40% increase in 2020, along with a rate rise from 2% to 2.5% on employers. For those reasons, I remain firmly of the view that this amendment should be rejected, as it was on the two previous occasions a similar proposal has been brought before us. There is no good reason to adopt a different approach now, and I strongly urge members to vote against this amendment, both parts of this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Helier.
Thank you, sir. Those of us who have seen any number of government plans over the years will be familiar with the position of Reformed Jersey in regard to social security contributions and long-term care tax. A similar amendment has often been brought by Deputy Mezek in previous years, but on this occasion, members will have the option of voting for either suggestion separately. Deputy Cole mentions this in his amendment, where he states that during the 2024 government plan debate, some members preferred to await the outcome of the ongoing actuarial reviews of the funds. Those reviews published earlier this year did not raise concerns, and so it seems to me that such drastic action would be inadvisable at this current time. I must accept that it makes a change for Reformed Jersey to be attempting to balance the books, even though they are the ones who are supporting the huge increases to the civil service wage bill that we have seen over the past 2 years. And of course more to come in 2026. This does seem to be an effort to try to reduce the number of wealthy residents and high earners coming to Jersey to boost our economy and who are already making large contributions to the Treasury. When considering the art of taxation, losing millionaires and entrepreneurs is never a good idea. A French finance minister once said, "You are supposed to pluck the goose so as to obtain the largest amount of feathers with the smallest amount of hissing." The deputy wishes to throttle the golden goose. I would like to remind members of the great work that Locate Jersey are doing to promote our island. They very rarely receive the credit that they deserve. Recently, there was a double-page spread in the Sunday Times commenting on the number of families relocating to Jersey, and as we all have discovered, the number of 2-1Es this year has reached a record of 36 being approved to arrive on the island. I believe that 5 of the arrivals in the last 2 years have been billionaires, and the majority are from the UK, trying to escape from the Labour government's assault on wealth creators, which seems to be a policy that is shared by Reform Jersey. To my eyes, we must continue to attract those who are able to invest in our island economy, and I believe that this amendment will send the wrong message to those who can choose where they wish to be domiciled. I advise all members to vote against this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else speak on this amendment? Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. I only wish to put my light on because the Treasury Minister asked us to read her speeches from 2022. And it may be slightly tangential, sir, but in 2022, the Treasury Minister was very clear that the Long-Term Care Fund and in particular Social Security Fund were hypothecated funds. And she said, would the Assembly be happy to vote to take money from either of these funds to support general reserve or meet other costs? Well, she may not I wanted to talk about that during this budget, sir. Members have Hansard accessible online, and I'm sure they can read the rest of it.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. And I'm grateful to Deputy Curtis for pointing that out, because I certainly am looking forward to the support of members who were concerned at the future of funding for the Social Security grant, as this amendment has nothing but a positive effect on it and mitigates any future pressures that may arise from decisions made, whether you agree or disagree with them in this budget. And that is one of the senses in which Deputy Coles proposes this at a helpful moment. But so when these debates come and go, they make me think of the rather cynical line that we often hear from members of the community when they're explaining why they don't engage with politics. And they often, we've all heard it before, people say, yeah, politicians, they're all just the same, aren't they? And this is one of those debates that proves that that is complete nonsense. And in fact, politicians from different wings of politics find themselves approaching subjects from different universes, frankly, as much as what's been said by opponents of this amendment are things that I find unrecognisable with the reality that I live in, sir. The Treasury Minister said a very revealing line in her speech when she referred to the future of these schemes, saying, everyone will have to pay more in due course. I really, really hope that that is front and centre of the election manifestos next year of those who oppose this. Because despite the inaccurate and disparaging remarks about Reform Jersey's position on financing our public service through tax and spend, and Deputy Ayer being the one guilty of that so far, is we are straightforward and honest with the public about those challenges when it comes to election time, and we face that on by having principles in what we stand for, which is, sir, we should not be piling on regressive taxes and stealth charges on ordinary working people in Jersey, whilst the unjustifiable loopholes exist for those at the top. And sir, I don't know if the Treasury Minister thought she was laying a trap here when she said that I will inevitably come back with my standard line about young people leaving the island when it's referred to the prospect of high earners leaving the island with policies like this. But I just wonder if members know how it must feel to be a young person looking at your prospects in Jersey and not being sure that they're actually good enough to justify staying here, and hearing leaders bending over backwards to say we must come up with exemptions and loopholes for these people, but you down there, tough luck, you're not getting a look in any of this, and we're not going to consider you at the same level, because it's one rule for them and another rule for the rest of us. And that is what is at the heart of this, and this is what we accept is unjustifiable in our tax system. Deputy, I loved the fact he brought this up. He brought up the record numbers of 2-1Es coming to the island. Well, boy, sir, I can't wait for all that wealth to trickle down, because that's apparently what that's all about, and yet we're still in such a difficult position with our public finances. Is that not a sign that the model's not working? The fact that we keep doing the same things we've been doing, and yet we still have all these problems that we're arguing about in this assembly. That is the evidence, as clear as day, that the totality of our tax and spend model is not working. And so what Deputy Coles proposes in this is about as harmless as you could get. So the asking for the cap to be lifted on employers' social security contributions, the idea that lifting that cap, which is 2.5%, by the way, on that income above 317,000, will push people out of the island, is, in my view, not just unevidenced and unbelievable, but I actually kind of think is slightly unpatriotic as well, sir, because I think this island has so much going for it that 2.5% on income, that's the employer paying it, not the employee. Employee doesn't get touched by that, doesn't mind. The employer, sir, that is going to be exclusively the kind of role, sir, that if you are going to ask the person working that job to relocate, firstly relocate where to, because if it's to the UK, they'll be paying substantially more anyway, even under this policy. But if you're going to ask them to move, the cost of facilitating that is going to be more than the extra you'd be paying in contributions anyway. And if you were to get rid of that member of staff and employ someone elsewhere, that member of staff is going to be the sort of person who's got a deal written into their contract for what happens when they get gotten rid of like that. And that cost of that, whatever payout it ends up being, is going to be more than the tax that they would be paying for it. So it is nonsensical to think that that would be the case. But the rhetoric, sir, that it's a tax on jobs. Well, yes, sir, most people have to pay a tax on their jobs as well, whether it's their own contributions or their employers' contributions. Why should that not be the case for others? It's an inconsistent and hypocritical position. And, sir, the long-term care tax, that is one that from its outset, it was projected that the rate would need to be raised. It was 1% when it first was introduced, then went up to 1.5%. I think 3% might be the eventual projection of where it's meant to get to. And as a society, we may think that that's a price worth paying to ensure that a long-term care system is in place to benefit all of us when it comes to it. And the scheme is by no means perfect, and there's things that need to be done, and I know the Social Security Minister is looking at those. But, sir, I think it's unconscionable to ask people to pay a greater percentage on their incomes, but say to one section of society, you're completely exempt from it. And I just invite members to think how that double standard plays out to people when it's put to them. So I can make absolutely no apologies for supporting what ought to be one of the most basic, reasonable and progressive measures that could be done to our tax system that would raise extra revenue that we know we need. It's beneficial for the Social Security Fund, given this, we can't do anything until the actuarial review. What do you think it's going to conclude? Is it going to conclude that an extra £6 million a year is bad for the fund? Really? No, it's not. It's going to say that would be positive. So, and of course the same for the long-term care fund as well, sir. So we make no apologies for raising this, and we will keep raising it. And when future governments, whether we're a part of them or not, come back with that everyone will have to pay more in due course, they will have us in some shape or form saying the highest earners must be part of that equation, because if they're not, you are putting a double standard on ordinary working people in Jersey, which is not just morally unjustifiable in the situation we find ourselves in today, is economically unjustifiable as well. And so members should vote for the amendment on that basis.
Deputy. Deputy Scott.
Hello, sir. Sorry, sir. Yeah, thank you, sir. Yes. I do believe the previous speaker was talking about different universes, and I do agree that he certainly lives on a different planet from me. I get the feeling that some civil servants are valued more than others when it comes to bringing certain propositions, when it comes to reform pledges. One area that I'm thinking of is the economics unit in government, because I'm just interested to know where the economic impact assessment is. And of course, I might have been asking this about the residential tenancy law as well, because we did have one, it's just not been published. But I know when we talk about being straightforward and honest, it's really important to be transparent. So why not just simply ask for an economic impact assessment that actually supports the argument? I think I know why. But let's move on. Let's move on to the correlation between the number of 11Es and increased public sector spending. I'd like to refer the previous speaker to a website called Statology.org, which actually deals a lot with the difference between correlation and causation on statistics. It shows you these graphs, and it shows you that the patterns are almost the same, and therefore why some people therefore might conclude that the number of Nicolas Cage movies released in a year aligns with the number of swimming pool drownings. It's that sort of thing. It's just not logical. So I kind of just say, sir, if you really seriously are going to bring something like this, argue the case better. I won't be supporting this amendment.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Gorst.
Thank you, sir. maybe I ought to start with where I agree with Deputy Coles. You're surprised, sir. I can see that you think, is there anywhere I'm going to be agreeing with Deputy Coles? But his analogy to the UK and his criticism of a UK policy, I absolutely agree with him on. Whilst sometimes in this assembly we might look to the UK and import its overly bureaucratic institutions, legislation and approaches to things, and we're told in this assembly that the UK's got one, so we better have one as well, otherwise we won't attract workers and we won't be successful. I agree with him. That and those arguments have had their day. Because when we look to the UK, and particularly what they have done to dissuade entrepreneurs, high net worths, innovators in the tech sector, then there should be a salutary lesson to us. Because it's not scaremongering to say that if we get these policies wrong, people are more mobile than they have ever been. And we see in the UK thousands upon thousands of highly skilled, highly paid individuals, investors that have supported economic growth, leaving as a direct result of policies that believe that life should be something other than it is, and that believe that policy making can be delivered outside of human behavioural observation. And for me, that is a good place to start when considering again this proposal. I absolutely understand Reform Jersey's manifesto commitment to deliver this change as well as other changes. We heard, and no doubt we will hear again at the end when we come to discuss the overall budget, their belief on how we should approach tax and spend. My colleague minister has, on at least 2 interventions so far during the course of this debate, said that our tax and spend model is broken and that his party will be clear about what their approach is. And I actually think that's healthy, because I think that at the forthcoming election, it does behove us all to discuss our economic model and discuss how we manage public finances. It won't come as a surprise to my coalition colleagues that I don't share the unalloyed sunny uplands that party politics are going to manage the economy and lead to suppression of public sector growth as was articulated. But again, these are the right sort of approaches that we should be considering. So, this proposal will, as the mover said, affect businesses and highly salaried employees. And for some members of this assembly, they will make a simple mathematical calculation which says you have a set, let's for example say you have 100 of these individuals employed across 10 firms. You will simply take the cap away and you will take the contribution to either the Social Security Fund or the Long-Term Care Fund, because you've done a mathematical calculation. And yet the evidence from everywhere else in the world shows that in the current economic climate and the global uncertainty, that final calculation doesn't happen in reality because people move. And it really does surprise me that it can be suggested that it's unpatriotic to tell the truth about what highly mobile individuals will do. Because we can make these changes and we can see that sector of either businesses or our community not wholly move, but partially move, maybe wholly move, because we are already an expensive jurisdiction. We already manage those individuals who want to come with the benefits of living in glorious Jersey, but they pay for it, compared to even going a few miles north, where the cost of moving there is much less, or to some European member states, or we'll come on to actually where people are moving now, which we find unpalatable and we don't know how to deal with, but we're not unusual in that regard. The whole of Europe is struggling with that issue. My colleague minister also said, well, if we've had all of these 2-1Es, then he looks forward to the wealth, he used his words, trickle down that they are bringing. Well, I can tell him right now that this budget benefits from the £250,000 minimum tax per annum that they are bringing to this community. Now that is a simple calculation. That is the commitment they make when they move. But we're not just talking about 2-1Es, and I understand that we can have a philosophical difference about whether we want those individuals in our community, whether we want the family offices that they bring, whether we want the hedge funds that they bring, whether we want the innovation and technological solutions that they bring. We could have all of that debate. We're also talking about the highly skilled individuals who are not 2-1-Es, who are employed in this sector of our economy. But that is a choice we can make. And I, for one, am very clear which choice I think is in Jersey's best long-term interest. And for me, we don't want those individuals leaving, just in the same way that we don't want our young people leaving or our working population leaving. I very much support the work that he's been doing, the millions of pounds that he's had to support people onto the home ownership ladder, the work that Andiam are doing on social housing to give people a hope and a future. But that has to be right across our economy. We have to, not only doing that work, understand where public finances come from and what we need to do to maintain a strong economy, which is what we require in order to deliver public finances to provide those supports right across our community. We can't disconnect them. And I suppose, which I was going to say in another debate, one of the things that I've found difficult about this budget debate so far is that we've seen what appears to be division, the separating out. And I don't believe that we in Jersey can afford the luxury of being divisive. We absolutely have to work together, because where are those thousands of people from the UK that their policies are driving out? Where is the prime location that they're going to? Are they coming for quality of life to the Channel Islands? Some are, we know that. Are they going to sunny Tuscany or Milan? Some are, we know that, but they're having to adjust their systems as well. But where are they both going? Something that we didn't think would happen because we thought that quality of life was everything. They're going out to the Gulf by their thousands. And I'm not sure quite if I should say this though, but let's just be clear. I have met with people who were in Jersey, so these individuals come to Jersey, but they also move. We have arrivals and we have departures. Met people who, out of courtesy, because I was involved in their decision to come to Jersey, but out of courtesy have come to see me again and have said, what's really surprised us, they use my first name, sir, but I know that's not parliamentary. What really surprised them was that they got off a flight in a said Gulf country. They were met off their plane. They were taken into the offices downtown. They were encouraged to relocate. They had access to on their phone an application process on an app. And they thought, well, we will apply. There's no tax for them. They're provided with accommodation subsidised. The costs of the moving of their company are underwritten for months. So that's the cost underwritten. They're then moving on to have no tax. And having met the relevant minister, they were ushered into an anteroom, given a cup of coffee. And by the time they'd finished their cup of coffee, their application of acceptance and the paperwork was done. This is what we're up against with ensuring that we continue to attract and keep our entrepreneurs, our highly skilled workforce, which is critical to our economic future. And that's why, for me, This is a policy which I understand, because the mover used this word many, many times, for him is based on fairness, but not based on the reality of the world in which we live and which we now, as an island community, compete. And that's right. That's why we should have these conversations in this assembly, because they're critically important. And we should have these conversations during election time as well, because they're critically important. Would these funds open their arms to more money? Would we open our arms to more money? Oh, well, of course we would. But if we are going to ask islanders to pay more, are these the two funds that we will be asking them to pay into, and is this the way we would want them to pay into? I rather think, back again to Social Security Reserve Fund, we've got £2.5 billion in that fund, so let's not forget that. Long-term care is more challenging. But the real challenge for public finance funding is the health department. And if we are going to make changes and ask islanders to carefully pay more, back to Deputy Ayers plucking the goose, then that money should be allocated and we should be saying clearly where it should be going and where the pressures are. Not simply coming as an amendment to a budget because it's in the manifesto. In a way, I don't criticise for that, because that's how politics works. That's how it should work. So I'm not criticising for that. I just don't think that it deals with the challenges that we face as an island. It certainly doesn't deal with the challenges we face in public finances, and it would fundamentally reduce our competitiveness at the time when people are more globally mobile. The world is more uncertain, and we see it playing out in real time every day on our TVs, not just here, across Europe and across the world. And I urge members, so my last second, to reject the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Brenner.
Thank you, sir. I think this is a very interesting debate because of its timing. Deputy Miller started the case by saying that this was a case of déjà vu. But actually there is a difference, and it was picked up in the comment that Deputy Curtis made, because we are in a very different position with regard to the Social Security Fund than we were before this budget. And I do wonder if the Treasury Minister, the Chief Minister, the Assistant Treasury Minister realise what they have done. In kicking the door down to the Social Security grant, they have at a stroke also kicked away a central argument against this amendment. It's not the only argument, but it is a significant one. The Treasury Minister is shaking her head, but I would say it is because previously a central argument against removing the cap was that the fund didn't need the money, and I know it was because that was one of the reasons I didn't vote for it in the past. It has now lost almost £300 million in income that would have had, according to the formula, when that statement was being made. And at the very least, it is impossible to argue that the fund is in the same place as it was when that argument was advanced. Deputy Mezek indeed picked up this point and argued that if we were against the raid on the grant, then we have to be in favour of this. And I do think that one of those unintended consequences, the collateral damage of taking such a brutal measure on the Social Security grant without doing a full actuarial review, is one of those things that comes home to roost. You kick the door down to something, you can never quite put it back on. It never quite fits in exactly the same way. It's a weaker edifice. You have crossed a little threshold. So members may be thinking then that I am going to support this, but there is another side to this argument. I said it knocked away one of the arguments. But I think there is another one to this. I think I listened to the speeches, eloquent speeches, of course, about this amendment, and the argument is, of course, an intensely moral one. I think the proposer would accept that, and probably his colleagues. But I think when we're discussing issues of tax, we have to ask what is the issue it is trying to solve. It seems to me it's trying to solve its own issue, because it is a moral issue. It's done for the sake of moral rightness. And so the primary reason for doing it is not to replenish the funds. That is an argument that can now be advanced, but it's not the primary reason. And the reason we can say that with some confidence is if the need of the Social Security Fund was the motivation, then you wouldn't start by pillaging it. So we're in a contradictory position. So the moral argument is of course compelling, but I do think that Deputy Gorst raised important points, and I think the signal failure so far in the speeches from Reform Jersey has been the inability to acknowledge that there is potentially any downside to making this change. And I don't think that's plausible. As Deputy Gorst argued, there is a real world out there. It may be easy to label people who make decisions on the basis of tax as unpatriotic. But actually, we all make decisions on financial grounds in lots of different ways, about jobs we take, places we live. It's a perfectly normal course of events. So a tax purely to equalise contributions on moral grounds without considering costs is, I don't think, plausible. And so I would say, pending the full-scale examination of government finances and the examination of the difficult choices that the island will undoubtedly face, particularly for health, as Deputy Gorst says, if we're really tackling those big issues, the fundamental issue may not be, it may be, but it may not be, around the Social Security Fund. And I think that we should be thinking about that first. And I did argue very strongly in my speech on Amendment 4 that there should be no raid on the Social Security grant without a full actuarial review. I think it cuts both ways. I don't think we should be messing with the Social Security grant until that full actuarial review has been done. Not when the arguments are not yet balanced. So I'm not prepared. Members can see that I've argued two contradictory things in a way. I've come at this with two different things. And there is one obvious course of action in this, given this balance of arguments. And I am going to abstain. I would say I'm going to aggressively abstain on this. And it is a kind of plague on both your houses. In a way, a plague of both your houses is perhaps a little strong, but members will understand the point that I am making. I do think that the government has made the day when that Social Security cap is removed, they have brought that step significantly closer. I think it is in play in a way that it wasn't in play in the past, and that is something that they have done. But if I were to accept the argument that that meant we should top the grant back up with the £6 million from this, I think it amounts to you steal $250 million one day and pick someone's pocket to try and make amends the next. And I don't think that is what I'm going to do. So as I say, I will aggressively abstain on the Social Security part. But on the long-term care fund, actually, I have yet to hear a single argument against it. The only argument that has been advanced is that the fund is that in one day we're all going to have to pay more and that the £6 million isn't enough. Well, that's not a compelling argument. If the government really wants us to vote against that, I think we need to hear a much more compelling argument as to why, if everybody's going to have to pay more, that when our first port of call would not be to remove that cap. Because otherwise, I think I do have to say that Deputy Mezig is correct. It's going to be very, very hard to ask people to pay more into this fund without removing that cap. It just is not a good look. So I look forward very much. I hope there's somebody left in the government who wants to speak, who can try and persuade me not to support that part.
Thank you, Deputy. Helier.
Thank you, sir. The last section of Deputy Renner's speech means that I'll probably go slightly easier on him, because I don't want to alienate him from at least the partial support. But I was thinking that this proposition, certainly the first part, is grist for his mill in the sense that it gives him the opportunity to take a swipe at both government. He used to be part of government, of course, but he's not part of this government, and Reform Jersey, sir. So he must be loving that from his fence-sitting position to aggressively abstain. I've heard the term of radical moderates before, but not of aggressive abstention necessarily, but we learn something new every day in this assembly, sir. So let's put this in perspective. What is actually being asked for from Deputy Coles? If we take an individual in the island who earns £500,000 a year, that's not something that applies to most of us, certainly not most of the ordinary members of the public. But if Deputy Renner in particular could imagine somebody in St. Brelard, perhaps who lives around the Lemoy Ring, who is quite wealthy, around, Petit Port, or possibly even in one of the penthouses in St. Brelard's Bay, who does have an income of £500,000 a year, as opposed to somebody who might have £50,000 living in Le Kennebec Park or Red Houses. What is the impact on that individual from this change if we were to make it today? The impact is that, first of all, for them, when it comes to their social security contributions, no change. So what Deputy Coles, I understand, is proposing here is that they would, as an employee, on their salary, pay nothing extra. So they're not going to be paying any extra social security on that. Correct me if I'm wrong. The next point is that the employer would pay something more for that employee, and the sum that the company, let's say, would have to pay that individual on £500,000 a year would be £4,575. So that's the differential. So my calculation, 2.5% of 183. That's what the company is going to pay. Now, is the individual going to pay? Are they going to leave the island when they're not paying any more social security contributions? No, that individual isn't going to leave the island. Why would they? Is the company that pays that individual, who can afford to pay them £500,000 a year, going to leave? And of course, that's a scenario in which they're employed by a company, and I accept that there'll be lots of other scenarios whereby, somebody might derive their salary in another way, and they have to pay their own stamp, etc., and it becomes more complicated. But in that scenario there, the company's not going to up sticks just because they have to pay an extra £4,500. So let's turn then to the long-term care. And this is an area I know where Deputy Renner is hopefully going to support the amendment, but I speak to other members therefore. It is that the 1.5% that we're asking this higher earner to pay, who earns £500,000 a year, is going to pay £2,745 extra from what they would pay now. Now, are they going to leave the island because of that? Given the fact that the island has given them employment and they're getting £500,000 a year, that they've maybe, their children, their grandchildren in really great schools over here, that they love the lifestyle in Jersey, and that they've either come over here especially, or that they're an indigenous, homegrown high earner, are they going to leave to go somewhere else? I think there's scaremongering going on. The arguments about whether cost-benefit analyses or impact assessments have been done, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it seems that we're always asked for those. But in the past, when I've been in the Assembly, and on many times, And let's say around 2014, 2016, when we would regularly ask the finance minister or the chief minister, whoever was in power, to justify the stance on 2-1-Es, for example, and to produce a cost-benefit analysis. They said, oh, we don't need to do that. We're not prepared to do that. They just took it on faith that this was necessarily a good thing. So when Deputy Gorst talks about the need to have a conversation around this, actually what we're talking about is a debate, because we're a debating chamber. This is what we're having today, and it's right that we have this during a budget debate, I think. And it's often taken on faith that this trickle-down economics is such, but actually, when it comes to the 2-1-E situation, that's taken as an automatic matter of faith. So the conversation or the debate really is to put the question back to government. How can they be sure that the current limits, whether it be on social security or if we were to talk about tax, are set at the right level? We do know that there's going to be demands for extra spending and for increasing income in the immediate future, just to stand still, let alone for any type of growth. So it is important that we remain open to new ways of getting income, which are not radical, but actually use the current mechanisms and structures that we have in place already. And certainly the social security contributions and the long-term care funds are two ways to do that. And so I would put it back to Deputy Renner, is that, you know, if you are really struggling and believe that the social security funds, which I don't think have been raided, I think we're putting slightly less than we would have been into those funds. If you want more money to go back in them, then the people we should be asking to contribute are not the ordinary residents who might live in red houses, Kennebay Park, in their flats, in their homes on the modest incomes, incidentally, who are paying proportionately full social security contributions. They're paying the full 6.5%, full 6% on their contributions. But of course, the higher you earn, proportionally, you're paying less. So I'm not sure how the Liberals in the Assembly feel about that regressive taxation which applies to social security. What I would say to Deputy Gorst is that it's interesting that he's on first name terms with the people going to and from the Gulf regions. So I know he spends a lot of time abroad, and they seem to be on first name terms with him. It might be better, especially if he's running for senator, if he were to be on first name terms with people who lived in Kennebay Park, in Mofonte, in red houses, in Gorey Village, and actually start to speak to those people about the real impacts of cost of living, about what they're seeing going out in their wage packets and what they're seeing going out in their social security contributions. Because Deputy Gorst was the one who talks about having a divisive conversation. And actually, it's not us who are talking about division here. It's actually the system itself, the tax and the social security system in the way it's set up is highly divisive, because we treat people fundamentally different depending on how much they earn. And it's actually that we give tax breaks to those who can most afford it, whilst this government and future governments, if they stay the same, sir, are going to be asking those who can least afford to pay it to contribute more. We've already heard ideas about GST going up to 6% to pay for capital expenditure. And I think this is why these kind of debates, not only should we not apologise for them, but it's absolutely right that we have these kind of debates during the budget debate, sir. And when it comes to Reform Jersey's policies, they will be clear, they will be thought out, and they will be costed, sir. And it's for that reason we would encourage other members, if they don't agree with it, you know, we can't rely on the magic money tree, sir, in cloud cuckoo land. We have to rely on real economics based on a system which I believe is that those who are most able to pay and most able to shoulder the burden of any future demand for increases are the ones who we should be asking first, not ordinary middle earners or lower earners, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Morrell.
Thank you, sir. And I stand to agree with Deputy Tadia that I do not want to see greater taxation burden or contribution burden on Jersey's lower and middle income earners. But that said, I don't believe that this particular proposition in any way helps Jersey in its distribution of, finances. And quite simply, if we were to accept this amendment, support this amendment today at this time, the message that it would send to the rest of the world about Jersey's business kind of atmosphere would be incredibly detrimental. If we are to change this upper earnings limit at any point, then it should be done in a proper, orderly fashion with appropriate consultation, so people know it is coming and can be therefore prepared for it. If we were to accept this today, sir, we would be giving employers a few weeks' notice that things are about to change, 27, a year and a few weeks' notice that things are about to change. But that would be done. Any consultation would be meaningless. It'd be entirely meaningless. And I think what it would say to anybody wishing to open a business in Jersey is that you can't actually trust Jersey to keep to its word or to have a stable base in which to operate. And that is one of the worst impressions that we can give to any people wishing to work in Jersey or do business in Jersey. So from that perspective, I think it's really poor. I think there is an issue around the wording, contributions and tax. I note in Deputy Cole's report, he does refer to it as a tax. I also note that in the Treasury Minister's comments, she refers to it not as a tax, but refers a few times to tax. And it is really important. This is not a tax, it is a contribution. And I think that is really important. And actually, if I must say, I believe Treasury need to be a bit more careful with their wording. Because this isn't a tax. And actually, that's one of the really important aspects of this, and another reason why I don't think this is the best way to, let's say, raise more money. Because this doesn't really fund public services. If this were to be increased, if we were to go with this proposition, we wouldn't really be funding public services. Most of it would just disappear into funds. Yes, it would help some people in long-term care. Yes, obviously through the social security system it would help people, but it wouldn't be helping the health system. It wouldn't be helping the education system. It wouldn't be helping the environment department. And that to me is an issue, because those are the areas that we are trying to stabilise and fund appropriately. And so this, if we were to accept it, would send an appalling signal out to the rest of the business community. And at the same time, it would do very, very little indeed to help islanders in terms of the receiving high quality public services. It wouldn't really change that at all. Maybe around the long-term care, it could do a little bit. But at the end of the day, all it would actually be doing is putting more money into that scheme, into that fund. The scheme itself would remain exactly the same. So I don't think this proposition in any way helps us improve public services. And I think it sends a terrible signal to the island, to anyone in the island wishing to do business here or seeking to invest in the island. I think it would be off-putting to them. And I think we need to have a really clear understanding of what people think about a small jurisdiction that keeps changing its mind or changing the goalposts. People won't be attracted to that. They can't be attracted to that because I read it in the FT earlier today. Businesses want certainty. I mean, this in other areas is something that, we can see other massive jurisdictions creating massive amounts of uncertainty. To some extent, they can get away with it because of their sheer scale, size, and economic power. But they won't be able to get away with it forever, and it will be hurting those countries that act in that way. But we, as a tiny island, and 100,000 people, and yes, we have an amazingly large economy for an island of 100,000 people, but it's still a tiny economy compared to pretty much any other jurisdiction around. And so we can't afford to destabilise what people think of us in that way. And Jersey has, and I know it's boring from a political perspective, but actually that boredom is a really good thing. We want people to look at Jersey, people who are thinking of investing in Jersey or thinking of using our financial services industry or engaging in our economy in any way. We want them to think of us as really quite dull. because they need to know what's going to happen tomorrow when they engage with Jersey. And if we were to bring this amendment through today, we'd be blowing that whole reputation out the water. And it's a reputation that's taken decades to create. And so we need to foster that reputation. And I really urge the Assembly not to throw such a reputation away on a Wednesday evening when we're all feeling quite tired. I think that would be incredibly damaging to this island. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Balash.
So I just want to say a few words because I thought that Deputy Gorst expressed the opposition to this proposal in his usually eloquent way, and I have really not very much to add to it, but I do want to say this. Deputy Coles, in his report, says that it's maintaining such a structure is both unfair and economically unsound. Unfair it may be. I'm not sure, but it may be. Economically unsound? How on earth do we know? We've had from Deputy Coles half a page of analysis of what the economic implications of such a change would be. Even from the government, we've only had a page and a half of comment on what this potential change could do to the economy. I tend to agree with Deputy Renouf that there may be a distinction between the Social Security Fund and the Long-Term Care Fund, because long-term care, for all its terminology, is actually a tax, and it may very well be that there is some justification for removing the cap there. But before I even contemplate such a move, I want to have a proper economic analysis. I want to know what the implications are. And I, for my part, am not prepared to make a decision of this magnitude on the hoof. It's not the appropriate way to proceed.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Tom Bennett.
Yes, sir. I have to admit I hate standing up to speak here, particularly unscripted. But I do want to thank Deputy Gorst for making what I think was a very, very sobering speech indeed. It amazes me how blind and complacent we are here when we're told that the very people on whom we rely, we've got a finance industry here without which we would all be very, very much more impoverished than we are. And we're being told that the people that we've relied on for 40 years and that have served us very well are going elsewhere, and they're being accommodated while they're having a cup of coffee. If people can't hear what's happening here, I'm amazed. I come from a background where the whole time we spent our time looking at how we were going to increase the pot and make more money, not how we were all going to look inwardly and cut it up. And that's what I've seen here for 3.5 years. Everybody's squabbling over the pie that's wheeled in on a golden trolley. It has been for far too long. And as I say, I think there's going to be an election soon. I think this sort of debate shouldn't have happened as an accident. I think it needs to happen in a much more robust way. And I think these issues are going to be extremely important when we come to the next election. Because if you make everything fair and even, that's fair enough. And it usually tends to end up with everybody descending to the lowest common denominator. And I think we need to look forward and have a very, very different approach to how we do politics over here. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. I'll start by saying that I'm glad that I have so much in common with Deputy Miller as the Treasury Minister, sir. Not only did we both kind of sum up how LTC is distributed incorrectly, and it turns out that more people benefit from it than I realised, which strengthens my argument as to why it should be more of an equal contribution into that fund. But we've also hopefully going to be successful on the third time of trying. Obviously, the Minister brought the senators back and they got in on the third time of trying within this term. So let's not cast too many aspersions about trying things 3 times and hoping for it to come through again. I think it's quite interesting, sir, that actually Deputy Gorst has said that he agrees with us in principles on certain things, because actually I probably will surprise him by saying that I agree with him as well. There are certain examples in the UK that I don't think should be replicated in Jersey. For example, their upper rate of tax. You'll have to go a long way to convince me that actually we need to introduce an upper rate of tax before we level the playing fields, before we can see that actually how much money do we need to have our tax and spend model to work as efficiently and as equitably as possible on the money that we bring in. So he can sit in comfort that there will not be any upper rate of tax coming from me at any time soon. Deputy Morell mentioned about, I'll go on to something else that Deputy Gore said, because he talks about people going off to the Gulf, being able to be served coffee while their applications are processed, and of course, and they don't pay any tax in the Gulf, because that's obviously they have their sovereign wealth fund. Obviously, the world is turning its back on fossil fuels slowly, so that's an industry that they're really going to have to look after themselves closely on, and we'll see what happens. But for a lot of people, he says he knows people who goes over to the Gulf. I too have met plenty of people who've gone over to the many engineers, because actually it's something that the Gulf has been calling out for, not just finance people. They normally go over there 2-3 years before they come back, because Jersey offers something that the UK doesn't and the Gulf also doesn't. Jersey is a very safe island with good connections back to the UK, and the most important thing to a lot of these people with high wealth is that we are Anglified. We offer them the same conditions of living within the UK that they don't get in the Middle East. There is restrictions on so much in the Middle East that just don't exist in Jersey. Deputy Morell was talking about trust and political stability. Well, let's not forget there are 10 members of this Assembly that were elected on a manifesto that we keep aiming to deliver on. And Deputy Miller is correct. This is one of our manifesto commitments, and this is why we have brought it back. I do remember earlier in the term when another member of this Assembly tried to bring something on tax policy in the middle of the year, and he was told by one member of this Assembly that actually we should be talking about tax things during the budget. So here I am presenting a tax thing within the budget. So we do have political stability in Jersey. We need to be better to build political trusts. Like I said, Reform Jersey delivered a very detailed manifesto, and we kept to our pledges. We are pushing forward on our agenda. That agenda does not involve destroying the finance industry. That is not something that we stand for. For some reason, it's become out there as a sentiment that reform is anti-finance. We're absolutely not. We are for equality. We want fairness. We want our funds to be paid for equally. And Deputy Morell also made the point, obviously, that I did use in the report that I called it a tax because it's collected by Treasury. It's a percentage based on your income. Or, but by any other name, that is a tax. But of course, we called it a charge. But so when it is, but all in name. So it's disappointing to hear that Deputy Renifer is going to be aggressively abstaining. I thought I had him on a winner when I separated these two things out, but actually he's supporting the one I didn't necessarily expect him to support. But it's good. It's good because people realise that actually we're going to ask the ordinary islanders, our doctors, our teachers, our street cleaners, our shelf stackers, anybody who works in retail, to start paying more in long-term care. If this budget goes through on page 89, it gives details that clearly shows that the government has projected, their table of projections includes an increase of 1% on the long-term care charge. That means from 2027, sir, ordinary working people will be paying 2.5% long-term care. And sir, if that element of my amendment here isn't accepted, sir, then I will be absolutely voting against this budget as a whole. Because I do not think that we should be pushing forward with that without clear evidence, as other people have said, as to how that is going to be fairly distributed. I'm only one member, obviously every member can make their mind up what they do with the rest of the budget, but that is why I'm pushing forward on that too, the cap on the long-term care, sir. I won't go on for any longer, sir, because I realise we are getting closer to the end of the day. We don't make good decisions when we're tired. So, as I did make the point earlier, sir, I will be taking this in parts, and I will call for the appel.
Thank you, Deputy. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. The first vote will be on the first part of the amendment, namely abolishing the upper earnings cap on social security contributions. I'll ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have the chance of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. And that's the first part of the proposition has been rejected. 13 votes pour, 30 votes contre, and 1 abstention. Do you want the 13?
Those voting for, Deputies Southern, Doublé, Ward, Alves, Mezek, Coles, Porre, Catherine Curtis, Feltham, Jearn, Kovac, and online Deputies Andrews and Tadier. The abstention was Deputy Renner.
And we now move on to the second part of the vote in respect of abolishing the upper earnings cap on long-term care contributions. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. As the second part of the amendment has been rejected, 16 votes for, 28 votes against.
Can we have the 6?
16.
Those voting for, the Conotop of St Saviour, Deputies Southern, Doublé, Ward, Alves, Mezek, Coles, Porre, Renouf, Catherine Curtis, Feltham, Jearn, Kovac, and Alex Curtis, and online Deputies Tadier and Andrews.
The next matter to be considered.
Propose the adjournment, please. I would like to explain why. Next amendment is mine, and I have 10 minutes for opening speech, and I would like to have at least 15 minutes, which is basic time that we have in this assembly, to propose the amendment.
The adjournment is proposed. Is that seconded?
So,
Members content to adjourn?
Yeah, call for the appel if we're.
Do you want to speak on the proposal to adjourn, or do we go straight to the appel?
Not really. I didn't want to speak on any of that, so.
All right.
I was just wondering if the chair of PPC is confirming that we'll be sitting tomorrow night, unless I've missed it.
He's confirmed that, yes. So we move to the appel on whether we adjourn now or not. I ask the greffier to open the voting.
Sorry, sir, could you just say which way we have to vote?
If you want to stop now.
Do we have to
I'm not going to tell you.
stay or
No. If you want to vote now, you want to leave now, adjourn now, you vote pour. All right? If you want to carry on, you vote contre. So pour to adjourn now, contre not to adjourn now. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. announce the proposition has been adopted. 25 votes for, 17 votes contra. Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning.